What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was locked away for years and came back an unstoppable monster? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The forests of Hai no Kuni felt different, very different today. Lush forests being a distinctive feature of the land made it that much more noticeable. Typically, they were abuzz with life and energy, holding a light and amiable atmosphere. Something that made both Hai no Kuni and Konoha rather unique compared to the other nations and villages, plagued with a certain tenseness that came prior to any conflict. Today however they were dull, somber with an almost ominous appearance, heightened by the stormy gray skies and rain. Hitaki Kakashi believed it was an accurate reflection of the state his blonde student was currently in. Slumped over in his arms, leaking copious amounts of blood. He could heal quickly, but it wasn't fast enough for a wound this big. A wound inflicted by his signature move. The crushing realization that Naruto was knocking on death's door due to his actions began to set it. He could feel the adrenaline pumping in his veins, heightening the fearful clenching in his chest. Normally he'd suppress the rush since the jumpiness that came with it wasn't good for his profession, but the physical boost it gave him was much needed at this time as he pushed forward with all his speed. But as he ran he couldn't help but drift back to a particular line of thought. This was all his fault. He had taught Sasuke the Chidori. He was supposed to keep an eye on him and make sure he didn't betray the village. But his biggest failure was that he had failed to protect all three of his students. Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, he had failed them. He wasn't fit to be a Jonin sensei. He had told the Sandame numerous times, but the man had refused to budge. After brutally failing the first two teams he'd been given, he had been reluctant to take on a third. But he conceded for one last time because he had a personal involvement with two of the prospective students. Sasuke was the last of fallen teammates' clan, but more importantly to him, Naruto was the legacy of both said teammate and his late sensei. At first, they had been slated to fail like past teams. It changed however when Sasuke and Sakura offered their food to Naruto. It filled him with hope that they could become an actual team, that they would succeed where his own had failed. That was when he made his biggest mistake. Team 7 had been a terrible fit. Kakashi should have seen this, but he had ignored it in favor of some idealized notion that they would eventually begin to work together all by themselves. He hadn't put the slightest amount of effort into resolving any of their problems despite knowing full well what they were. Sasuke was too wrapped in his own warped emotions and desires. Naruto lived in perpetual denial to cope with an ignorant and hateful village. Sakura was a sheltered girl who had walked into a dangerous world with a very romanticized view of it. Guy was right, he was irresponsible. He knew of all these problems and the dangers they would face, yet he had put in the bare minimum required. He had been hypocritical to give Guy heat for teaching Lee how to use the 8 gates. Sure, it was hugely irresponsible, but at least he had known that he wouldn't use it against a comrade. He had almost known with certainty that Sasuke would end up using it against a comrade. He had a single-mindedness when it came to achieving his vengeance, and he couldn't be trusted with such power. Yet he taught it to him anyway because of his obsession with fixing his past and his damn pride. The whole having to prepare him to face Gaara? It was bull. Any rational human being would have pulled Sasuke out of the match. But he had been too concerned about upsetting him, and his ego wouldn't allow him to do it. He wanted to show his skills as a teacher. He arrived late in the Chunin exam finals because he was having second thoughts, but ended up barely getting there on time. So many things could have gone differently had he just talked with the Sandame instead of trying to handle things by himself. And all this had led to Naruto's current state. He didn't stab him through the chest, but he had been the one responsible for it getting there. Shaking his thoughts out of his head, realizing that his sulking was distracting him, he channeled all the chakra he could muster as he rushed back home. Izumo and Kotetsu did not attempt to stop him as he shot past the village gates, full well knowing the mission had gone south. Jumping through the rooftops, he got closer and closer to the hospital. Ignoring the protests of the nurses, he rushed up the hospital stairs. He reached Tsunade in a rush. She was annoyed at him initially for being loud in the hospital, but when she recognized the bundle over his shoulder, she felt her heart drop. Shikamaru felt all signs of relief vanish from him when he saw the state Naruto was in. His knees buckled slightly at the amount of red covering Kakashi's Jonin vest. Temari and Shikaku wore grim expressions on their faces, realizing what this meant. Tsunade slowly approached Naruto, keeping her face impassive. Shizune, find a clean OR and have 3 medics ready for surgery stat. You're too drained to do this. She spoke calmly, but there was an almost undetectable trembling. Shizune nodded, forcing herself to move. With her current level of exhaustion, the shock of seeing Naruto was almost too much for her. Pale-faced, she nodded and pushed through, quickly carrying out her orders. Kakashi placed Naruto on a stretcher that Shikaku pushed towards him, giving him a thankful nod. Tsunade was instantly by his side, curbing the blood flow as Kakashi pushed the stretcher with haste. With each step, he felt himself growing heavier and heavier. Years of honing his emotions and discipline kept him from losing focus as he quietly pushed his student into the OR, where he was escorted inside by the medic Nins. Tsunade paused before entering the room and approached Kakashi. There isn't much time now, but I need you to contact Jiraiya immediately. I don't care how, but I want him in Konoha by tomorrow. We'll talk more later. Hi Hokage-sama. Kakashi bowed and departed in a shunshin. All that kept him from losing it was faith. Faith that his student wouldn't go back on his promise and die before he became Hokage. Because as it had always been with him, he could do nothing to help when it mattered the most. September 15th. With the start of the new day, all the tension and worry from the mission had mostly evaporated. The Sasuke retrieval squad had failed their mission, but all of them were safe. Choji and Neji had been the worst of both, being in critical condition. The Akamichi food pills boosted the user's metabolism exponentially to allow them to convert their fat into chakra. But this placed an immense strain on both the body and the chakra network. Thankfully, foresight of the dangers of these pills meant that the Akamichi clan had long since begun producing a drug that helped minimize the damage. Choji would take several months to regain his strength and weight, but he would be fine. It had been Neji who was in great danger. Not only had he lost a lot of blood, but his lung had been punctured and he had narrowly avoided his spine from being severed. It had taken a lot of effort, but they had managed to stabilize him. He too was going to be all right. Both of them surviving was indeed a proud moment for the medical corps. They were both still unconscious, a testament to how difficult their battles had been. Kiba had received a few superficial wounds, but the worst part for him was how badly Akamaru had suffered. Being just a puppy, he was nowhere close to as sturdy as a fully grown ninkin. They were supposed to be partners, but Akamaru had nearly died. To an Inuzuka, nothing hurt more than losing their ninkin. They often became so overwhelmed with grief if their partners died that they would end their own lives. Kiba had wept for hours when his sister confirmed Akamaru would be fine. It was why she couldn't find it in herself to punch him for allowing his ninkin partner to be injured in the first place. Shikamaru had suffered the least amount of injuries, and this was real slap in the face for him. He had been responsible for the squad's lives, but he had come out with nothing more than a broken finger and chakra exhaustion, while his best friend had nearly died. He had been almost entirely resolved to quit as a shinobi, but words of encouragement from his father and taunting from Temari stopped him from stepping away from shinobi life. With his resolve renewed, he vowed to give his best for the sake of his village and comrades. This left only the final member of the retrieval team. Expectantly, he had recovered from all his injuries and was already awake. Physically, it was almost as though he had never left the village. But considering the fact that he refused to allow anybody into his room and only spoke to Shizune or Tsunade, spoke an entirely different tale. It was very easy to assume that Naruto didn't worry about too many things in the world. But few realized that he was far more sensitive than people realized. He never had a family and had been alone his entire life, so when he considered somebody to be like a brother to him, he meant it. His mind was just so clouded with questions on what exactly did Uchiha Sasuke mean to him. For a long time, he was his rival. He had come to consider him a friend and the closest thing he had to an actual brother. They had a bond, there was no denying it. That empathy for each other's plight, their mutual pain and loneliness had led them understand and appreciate each other. And Naruto cared a lot for Sasuke, so much so that his acknowledgement used to mean more to him than his own health. But it had changed now, it was different. There were a lot of feelings running through his head, but he couldn't quite put his finger on any of them. Well, to start, he had never felt as much overwhelming fury at a person as he did now. He had risked the lives of his comrades and had run to the person who had killed the Sandaime Hokage, the first person to ever acknowledge or care for Naruto. All to get power for his selfish vengeance upon his elder brother. It proved that nothing else mattered to Sasuke. Not the village, not their team, and worst of all, not even the bond that had meant so much to him. To him, there was no bigger insult than that. He had seen the hatred within Sasuke years ago. In the eyes of a recently orphaned 8-year-old, he had seen one stronger than anything the villagers could muster against him. It grew stronger every day and Naruto had known it. He had seen it every single day for all these years. Then why did he ignore it? It was empathy. Sasuke never understood it because he lumped it in with pity, and to be honest anybody in their position hated pity. But Naruto understood Sasuke's pain even from then. He understood how loneliness made you want to hate the world. After all, he experienced it every day. But that was what confused him. Did he empathize with him because he didn't want Sasuke to not feel the same loneliness, or was it a way for himself to escape his own? Maybe a bit of both. He had been the only person Naruto felt he could relate to. That was why he had invested so much in what honestly felt like a pretty one-sided friendship. But that didn't mean it hurt any less when he betrayed them. All those nasty things he said? It stung and it made him feel like absolute crap. Because it exposed every little insecurity that he had worked so hard to suppress. All surfacing and poking at him. How can you become Hokage when you can't save a friend? What are you without Kyuubi's power? Your best friend tried to kill you. How can you trust any of your other friends? Naruto grabbed his head with his hands as he began to feel his thoughts overwhelming him. A sudden noise and movement broke him out from his thoughts, for which he was thankful. Kakashi-sensei, he said in stiff recognition. He knew he was probably the last person Naruto wanted to talk to, but somebody was going to have to get him to talk about what happened. Letting him sit alone in his room and stew in what happened was not healthy by any means. He knew that from experience. Taking a deep breath he walked in. "Hey Naruto. Hope I'm not interrupting," he replied calmly. Seeing him up sent a wave of relief through the Jonin. He stared at him blankly for several seconds as though unaware of how to react towards him before he shook his head. "No sensei. I have something I want to ask you." Kakashi nodded to him in affirmation. Naruto took a deep breath articulating his thoughts. "Sensei, when I caught up to Sasuke in the Valley of the End, there were a lot of things that we both said and that happened in our fight. Naruto proceeded to slowly explain every single detail of the fight to Kakashi. Naruto could feel his sensei's anguish hearing the vicious encounter between his two students. He could understand just how much it had hurt Kakashi to see two kids who he had been responsible for, ones who he guided, protected and cared for, ended up fighting to the death like that. Seeing his sensei's somber expression, Naruto couldn't help but begin to feel a bit more anger towards the Uchiha for hurting another person important to him. "I see," Kakashi said sadly at the end of Naruto's explanation. "Kakashi-sensei, is it wrong to want to stay away from Sasuke? Is that abandoning my comrade?" he asked him quietly, refusing to look him in the eye. Kakashi closed his eyes. "That is something you must ask yourself, Naruto. You saw the result of attempting to retrieve him. Shinobi missions rarely go as smoothly as yours did, regardless if it was a failure or success. 99 times out of 100, most if not all of you should have died," he explained. Naruto looked down sadly. "Sasuke meant a lot to you, Naruto, but stop to think of it this way. Sasuke will resist any attempts to retrieve him, and anything to do with him would involve Orochimaru. This spells certain death for many who will be involved. The decision to chase Sasuke or not, it is the type of decision a Hokage would have to make." Naruto looked up towards his sensei. "Is it really this difficult?" he asked him. Kakashi nodded. "It's why the Hokage is not only the most powerful ninja in the village, but the strongest and wisest as well." Naruto stared at the wall. "I see," he muttered before looking up again, a bit of anger on his face. "I have some more things to ask you. Why didn't you or Sakura tell me about the curse mark?" Kakashi sighed wearily. "For bad reasons. I wanted to keep it under wraps, and at the time I didn't think you'd handle the news well." "What kind of excuse is that? You don't think I had a right to know what was happening with my friend?" "You had every right. I didn't trust you when you had done everything to earn it. You always obeyed me. You always had the team's back, and you always did what was the best for everybody else. You took my first lesson to heart and applied it even better than I could. I never acknowledged it, but you were always my best student." Naruto didn't like hearing this because he scowled at him. "I'm your best student?" He asked incredulously, when you first took Sasuke away to train, I was mad. I thought you didn't believe in me at all. I let it go because I realized Gaara was dangerous and because I figured something weird was going on with him and it had to do with Orochimaru. But then you didn't show up for my match. I trained so hard that month because I wanted to make you proud. You never acknowledged that I beat Neji, that I beat Gaara, that I got Ba-chan to return to the village. No, well done Naruto, or, I'm proud of you. The only time you ever say it is when I pull the team out of a sticky situation like with Zabuza. Then when I learned the Rasengan you said I wasn't ready when you taught Sasuke the Chidori. Did you ever believe in me at all? I know it may not seem like it, but I do believe in you 100%. I held an unfair expectation of you. To act in a certain way. To walk, talk, eat, train in a certain way. I saw you for what you could be and not for what you are right now. Not for what held you back and made it harder for you along the way. You have your faults, you lack discipline. Your attitude makes it hard to point out mistakes and you're obsessed with having an image of grandeur among people. I let it cloud the fact that you have incredible talent. With the most basic of abilities, you pulled off some amazing feats. Naruto, you're bound to become a great ninja, and I know with a little discipline, focus and dedication that I'm looking at the person who will surpass all 4 of the Hokages, you. This Naruto did not expect. He had spent several months thinking that his sensei considered him a disappointment. His actions certainly seemed to suggest so, never helping him train, never acknowledging his improvement or hard work. But now, he wasn't lying. Despite his actions, he could tell that deep down Kakashi did really believe in him to this extent. It was a confusing time for Naruto, but if there was anything that could guarantee an emotional response from him, it was to express your belief in his abilities. His sensei really did believe in him. He furiously wiped the tears from his eyes. Thank you Kakashi-sensei, I promise I'll work hard from now on and become the best ninja I can be. Kakashi ruffled Naruto's hair. I'll hold you to that. Sensei, before you go, I have a small favor to ask. Can you get me some books, so I can start training? He asked him. Kakashi gave him an odd look. Books? I thought you hated reading. Naruto blushed in embarrassment. I do. But you keep telling us that ninja has to be smart. That's my weakest area, so I should work on it, right? Kakashi couldn't help but smile. Looks like you're really taking this to heart. Good. He replied, I'll get you some books and scrolls that'll help you catch up, he said before leaving the room. As he walked outside, he was met with Jiraiya and Tsunade. How is he? She asked gently. He's fine Tsunade-sama. He's bounced back, and he's grown up a bit. He asked me to get him some books to help him get started on training, he replied. Tsunade heaved a sigh in relief. Thank God. I couldn't stand seeing him like that, she muttered. Jiraiya too relaxed slightly. That's good, Kakashi, I have a favor to ask of you. How can I help Jiraiya-sama? As I told you before, I'm planning on taking on a 3-year training trip. I intended to depart in about 4 to 6 weeks. Until then, could you help him get all his basics and skills to at least high genin level? He asked him. Kakashi nodded. Hi. It's the least I can do after neglecting his training, he said with a hint of bitterness before shining away. We need to talk, it's about Naruto's seal, Tsunade said, turning to her teammate. Your office? He asked, to which Tsunade nodded as both reappeared within Hokage Tower. Tsunade pulled out a sake bottle and poured the customary cups. Handing one to her teammate, they both downed it. You're pretty worried. What did you find? She shook her head. It's not good. You know he used the Kyuubi's chakra against Sasuke. I ran routine checks on him and it seems that every time he uses more of the Kyuubi's chakra than he can control, he loses a significant portion of his lifespan. How significant are we talking? He used enough for Kakashi to sense it some 50 miles away. The problem is that when he's not in control, the chakra attacks his own body, but it regenerates it just as fast. Given just how fast he can regenerate by himself, at this point I can say he's lost at least 3 to 4 months of his life. The more out of control the chakra he uses, the more significant the damage is. So, if I were to train him for 3 years to use that chakra, there's a good chance he won't make it past 30. This puts a major damper on my plans. Maybe it's for the best, Jiraiya. It gives him a reason to depend on his own strength. I understand the sentiment, but we can't afford to be so short-sighted. 3 years is not even close to enough time to get him ready to face the Akatsuki. He's not alone. He doesn't have to beat them himself. But still, he has ways to go. He's not the brightest. Tsunade glared. Stop right there, you hypocrite. He mastered the Rasengan in a week, the Kage Bunshin in one night, and he's even summoned Gamabunta. Where exactly did you get the idea that he's not bright? From where I'm standing, it looks like he's pretty damn sharp. Come on, you've seen the way he acts. That's not being stupid, Jiraiya, that's called being a child. For heaven's sake, you of all people should know the difference. He's not a genius like his father, sure, but that doesn't mean he's stupid. He's far sharper than the average ninja. Aren't you the one always saying training a genius is no fun? There's a difference here. I want him to survive Tsunade. If it means shaving 20 years of his life, then I don't mind, because it's better than being dead within the next 5. Enough, Jiraiya. Stop lying to yourself. This isn't about Naruto's lack of ability at all. You think that unless Naruto uses the Kyuubi's chakra it's a disgrace to Minato's sacrifice, don't you? Jiraiya looked away bitterly. He could have done so much more, Tsunade. It should have been me or Sensei to do the sealing, but Minato believed the potential Naruto held was greater than his own. And he was the Kiroi Senko, first sulfur monosulfide ranked shinobi ever, his reputation matching that of your grandfather and Uchiha Madara. He wasn't even in his damn prime and he had surpassed all of us. Yet he saw more potential in one child, something I agree with completely. But he doesn't have the time to mature. We have to speed it up, and the Kyuubi is the best way to get him strong fast enough to be ready for the Akatsuki. But what good is all that raw power if it comes at such a steep price? And I know you're not stupid, Jiraiya. The Akatsuki are after Jinchuriki, ones who can control a significant amount of their Biju's power. Do you really think they don't have methods to counter that? There are methods outside the Mokuton that can overcome a Jinchuriki. I don't want that to happen and Naruto to be helpless without it. If he's at least somewhat strong, then taking the risk of having a small boost is worth it, don't you think? Because 10 times 10 and 50 times 2 are both 100. Jiraiya stared at his teammate in surprise. When the hell did you get all wise? That's supposed to be my thing. You know, the great Toad Sage and all. Please all have white hair before you become wise. Tsunade snorted. Besides, I'm the Hokage, remember. Have to keep all my minions under my control. Minions? Jiraiya asked, amused. I'm pretty sure that's how tyranny gets started. Tsunade rolled her eyes. Whatever. Looks point is Jiraiya. We both agree the kid's got a lot of potential even without the Kyuubi. It's a pretty sweet trump card having all that extra chakra, but it's no point if it's your only card. There's more than just direct combat to deal with the Akatsuki. Whatever it is, it will be difficult, but I think that should be penance for ignoring him for over a decade. Jiraiya winced lightly. Glad to see your skills are as sharp as ever. He grumbled. Fine, I'll figure out something, Haim. I'll have a talk with Ma and Pa about his training then. Back in Naruto's room, as soon as Kakashi exited, Naruto turned his head to the window. You can come in, Naruto said calmly. A swirl of sand appeared in front of the bed, before it condensed to form Gaara. Their eyes met instantly, and Naruto noted a major difference since the last time they met. The hate-filled green eyes were gone. Now they were confused, lost, drifting without a purpose. Eyes that were all too familiar. It was the one he'd seen in himself when he was young and lost, and more recently Haku's right before he'd asked to be killed. I was told the eyes are a window to the soul. Gaara began in a calm voice. As you've probably realized, I have lost my purpose since you showed me the light, Uzumaki Naruto. Just Naruto, Gaara. Naruto interrupted with a smile. We're friends after all. Friends, Gaara muttered. It was such an alien concept to him. He had lived so many years in a haze of hate and loneliness. What makes us friends? I don't know, Naruto replied. I just want us to be. I want that too. Gaara spoke quietly. When Yashimaru betrayed me, I gave up hope on anybody ever understanding me or my pain. I wanted so desperately to inflict that very pain and loneliness on others so they would understand, but you know both my pain and my loneliness. You know what it is like to hold a Biju within yourself. You are a Jinchuriki just like me. The Kyuubi no Yoko couldn't be killed even by the Yondaime. I don't know why he did it, nor do I like thinking about it, but it was sealed inside of me when I was born. Which is why I want to understand the path you took. What kept you from falling under its influence? What made you who you are? What is your purpose in life? Naruto smiled wryly and looked out the window. You know, you're one of the few people who wasn't fooled by my whole, I'll be the greatest Hokage, routine. Since I became a ninja I kept telling myself my purpose is to protect the village, but I've seen the glares, any desire you have to protect them would not be genuine. Naruto shook his head. I got kicked out of the orphanage when I was 4. I didn't understand a lot of things, but everywhere I went, anybody I met they all seemed to hate me. Sandaime Jii-chan was kind to me, he'd spend time with me and make me feel better. But he'd just fill me with all these lies. That they were suffering, that they didn't know any better. No matter what they did to me or how they made me feel, they were never wrong in his eyes. Gaara nodded somberly. He really did know what it felt like. But he was the only person I had. I didn't want to disappoint him, I wanted to be like him. Everybody saw him as this kind, benevolent leader, and I wanted to be like him. So I just rejected my reality. I acted like everything he told me was the truth, that the world was fair and just that one day everything would be alright because I proved myself to them. But not everything you said to me was based of this. What you said to me after our battle was your own belief. Because what I told you really was my belief. Everything I do is motivated by the fact that I want to keep those important to me safe. That will never change, but what will change is how I define those that are important to me and those that aren't. But you acted so fixated on being Hokage. From what you're telling me that desire was. It was something to give me hope. Everything only seems lost when you lose hope. It's the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. It may never be there, but as long as you can see it you'll keep running towards it. Hope, Gaara muttered. What if I were to do what you did? He asked him uncertainly. Naruto met Gaara's eyes. I don't know, I wish could be more help, but it'll help if you think of what's best for those you care about. You found them, didn't you? You found people who you care for? I always had them. Gaara replied, I feel this strange compulsion towards them now. I want to make sure that harm doesn't come their way, that they don't have to suffer or endure any pain. That's what it means to care for somebody, Naruto explained. Now you have the biggest motivator in the world. When they reopened, Naruto saw a familiar light in them, filled with raw determination and a fire. They were the same eyes he saw in the mirror every day. Then I have decided, I shall walk the path of light that you have shown me. From this day I will strive to protect my village with all my power, and I shall become the Cage. Naruto's eyes widened before a huge smile appeared on his face. That's great, Gaara. I know you can do it. Maybe, just maybe one day when you become Cage and I become Hokage, we'll share a drink together, he exclaimed excited. Gaara was taken aback by the sheer belief in his words. This time he felt his mouth moving into a smile. Then I will not let you down. Thank you for everything, Naruto, my friend, he said as he disappeared with a sand shunshin. Naruto smiled gently as he felt some weight lift from his chest. He was glad that Gaara now saw the light. He just knew it in his heart that Gaara would succeed. He would become Cage, but what mattered more to Naruto was that it meant he wasn't a failure. Maybe he couldn't have saved Sasuke, but he had shown the light to at least one person. And that was good enough for him at the moment. Though poor Kankuro and Temari would have nightmares for years from seeing Gaara's smiling visage. Somebody really needed to teach the boy how to smile normally. September 19th. Tsunade groaned when she heard a knock on her office in the hospital. Couldn't she get 5 damn minutes alone? Sarutobi-sensei was literally a saint in her eyes now. Come in, she said. The door slowly opened revealing Shizune, who slowly walked in. Tsunade let out a deep breath. Why did I ever accept this job? She muttered to herself knowing it was something important. What's the matter, Shizune? Tsunade asked her apprentice. Tsunade-sama about Naruto-kun. He's had his head buried in his books for the last 2 days and he's barely slept. He won't listen to anybody and sedatives don't work for more than an hour, she said concerned. Tsunade rubbed her head slightly. God, I need some sake right now. Come on, we're going to visit the brat right now, she said standing up. The two women walked in silence until she reached Naruto's hospital room. Pushing it open, Naruto just looked up slightly. Hey Tsunade-bachan. Shizune Nichan, he greeted. Tsunade quickly noted that Naruto had read 8 of the 10 books that Kakashi had given him. She signaled Shizune to give her a few minutes alone with him. Approaching his bed, what are you doing? Tsunade asked, putting her hands on her hips indicating she was not pleased. I have a lot to catch up and I can't waste time, he replied hesitantly. Tsunade slowly took a seat on the bed. She placed her hand on his and slowly made him close the book as she spoke gently. Training and getting strong is something that takes time. Years, in fact. It isn't worth losing sleep over it. Work hard, train hard, but resting it just as important. But, no buts, Tsunade cut off sternly. If you won't go to sleep I can arrange for it, she said, cracking her knuckles. Naruto paled slightly. Okay, I won't. I promise, he said hurriedly. I'll rest now, Bachan, don't worry, he said with a fake grin and spoke quickly. There it was again, that damned look of his. She'd spent enough time to know his facial expression and what he was feeling. It was evident he was upset about something but felt it was silly, so he didn't want to bother anybody. It was one of the things she detested most. Naruto, Tsunade spoke softly. I know something's bothering you. What is it? Naruto looked down. I'm just being silly, Bachan. Don't worry, he said with a frown. His found a gentle hand on his cheek, turning his face up. Nothing you feel is ever silly to me. Whatever it is, you can trust me no matter what, she said soothingly. His eyes widened before he looked away sadly. Sasuke said so many things during our fight. I always thought of him as a brother, but obviously that bond meant nothing to him. It hurts so bad, he sniffled slightly as he began to tear up, and now he means nothing to me, so why the hell am I still so upset? This is so stupid. Tsunade pulled him forward and hugged him tightly. That's not silly, Naruto. Being betrayed is the worst way to be hurt, believe me, I know. You can shed all the tears you want with me because in my eyes you'll always be just as strong. Naruto immediately buried his face in her shoulder and began to sob loudly. It'll be alright. You still have us, she said softly, stroking his hair. Naruto slowly calmed down. He kept his head buried for a few minutes. He slowly pulled back, his face calmer now. Thank you, Bachan, he whispered. You're welcome. Don't hold in anything like this. Talk, cry, yell, act stupid, I don't care. I can never think less of a future Hokage, can I? She asked with a smirk. Naruto couldn't help but smile. Of course not. I'm just that awesome Datbeo. Tsunade grinned and ruffled his hair. That's the spirit. Now I better not hear you're skipping sleep or food. Your health is more important than gaining strength, okay? Naruto nodded. Sorry for worrying you. I didn't mean to give you high blood pressure, but that could just be your age, he teased with a cheeky grin. Tsunade mock glared at him but just couldn't stay angry. Damn her for having a soft spot for this kid. Tsunade bopped his head lightly. Learn to respect your elders. Now get some rest, okay? She said. Naruto nodded as his eyes shut instantly, a blissful expression taking over his face. Slowly letting go, she pulled the sheet over him. He looks so calm. If only he were like this more often, she thought. She gently kissed his forehead and walked out with a smile. September 20th. Naruto's head jerked slightly when he heard a knock on the door. Who is it? Slowly the door slid open. Seeing a familiar mop of pink hair and concerned green eyes, he took a sharp breath. Naruto, this is a once-in-a-lifetime request. Please bring Sasuke-kun back. He ignored the slow stabbing pain in his chest seeing Sakura. It was difficult doing so. The request kept repeating over and over in his head. Naruto, can I come in? Sakura asked gently. Naruto nodded. Sure, Sakura, come on in. Sakura flinched slightly, not hearing the typical affection or suffix in how he addressed her. How are you, Sakura? He asked. I'm okay, Naruto. I became Tsunade-sama's apprentice recently and I've been learning medical ninjutsu from her. For a second he didn't say anything, which worried her. He seemed to be mulling over what this meant, which freaked her out a lot. The Naruto she knew was never one to stop and think. He was impulsive and wore his heart on a sleeve. She had expected him to get all excited and tell her how awesome she was, or to at least have some emotional reaction. Well, congrats, Sakura, he said in what sounded sincere. So I guess our team has been split among each of the Sannin now. She could hear the bitterness in his voice and it made her feel guilty. Looking downward she began to speak. Naruto, about that promise with Sasuke-kun. She couldn't complete her sentence. Because she could swear the room's temperature had fallen several degrees. Don't call him that, Sakura. He doesn't deserve your affection, he said coldly. Bewildered was an understatement. Sakura's eyes were practically bulging as she stared at her teammate, Naruto, but he cut her off again, not with coldness but a firm voice. Sakura, forget about Sasuke. Sakura's eyes widened in shock at hearing this. She never would have thought Naruto of all people would say such a thing about Sasuke of all people. But as always, she allowed her temper to dictate her reaction with him. Her fists clenched, her teeth bared, How can you say that, Naruto? He's our teammate and friend? How can you abandon him like that? She yelled furiously. Her anger subsided when Naruto began to glare. His normally bright, energetic eyes were ice cold, reminding her of the chilliness of the room. This expression should have been completely out of place of Naruto, but it suited him perfectly. She couldn't recognize the goofball she had come to know. He moved slowly as he got out of the bed, but as he got closer to her she began to backpedal furiously. She froze in place when he pulled back his bandages, revealing an enormous scar on his shoulder. Sakura, he broke my neck and stabbed me with the Chidori twice. He smiled when he did it. The Sasuke we knew would never do that. He may be gone or may not have existed to begin with. His eyes. Naruto shivered lightly, they were filled with hatred. So much hated. He reminded me of Gaara during the Chunin exams, but he was even worse. Sakura paled visibly. No, it can't be, she said in shock. Her Sasuke-kun acting like Gaara and trying to kill Naruto, their teammate and his best friend? Impossible. Naruto sighed. I'm sorry, but it's the truth, Sakura. She felt herself becoming desperate from Naruto's assertion. She couldn't sense an inch of deceit in his words, which only pushed her to further into her panic. Stop it, Naruto. Sasuke-kun isn't like that. He has risked his life for us. She shouted, trying her best to deny Naruto's claims. Naruto looked up at her with faint disgust. So that makes it okay for him to betray the village? To break our sensei's words, the way of our village. To spit on the legacy of Konoha by going to its worst traitor who killed Sandaime Jii-chan. Risking the lives of our comrades and trying to kill me after calling me his best friend. Would you be saying the same thing to Sasuke if I tried to kill him? He asked, his voice getting shakier and shakier as his anger and sorrow built up. Sakura wanted to say no, but she felt a chill in her spine when she realized what her answer would have been. It had been because she had felt that way once, a long time before, and to her shame still felt to a degree now. She would have wanted Naruto dead if he hurt even a hair on Sasuke. It shook her, that even after all the time and experiences they shared together as Team 7, that she could have such malicious intent towards somebody she considered a friend. She couldn't move an inch as the weight of that realization hit her. What the hell is wrong with me? She asked herself. Her eyes quivered as she felt tears begin to appear. So all the time we spent as Team 7 meant nothing? Were we never really a team at all? Naruto paused, trying to understand his own feelings. They were muddled with doubt and uncertainty. He found himself asking for the first time, what did Team 7 really mean to him? He looked up at Sakura, but she refused to make eye contact. Sakura, tell me something. Every time you hit me, every time you called me stupid and acted like I was a nuisance. Why, even after the Chunin exams you still treated me the same way? He asked, his breathing getting ragged. Why do you act like you care about me and then turn around and treat me like dirt? Why, Sakura? I thought we were friends. Sakura hung her head, unable to respond. Despite knowing that she treated Naruto worse than he deserved, she had always persisted. Much to her shame, it was because it made her feel good to a degree. Hindsight really was a bitch. Naruto looked away sadly. Sakura, I want to think that we were like a family, but every good memory I have I can remember 10 of you and Sasuke putting me down. I ignored it before. I ignored just how much both of you hated me. Sakura shook her head fervently. No. I don't hate you, Naruto. Please don't say that. What else should I think? He asked her. You say you don't hate me, but then you yell at me for bad-mouthing Sasuke or call me stupid because I do something wrong. The desperation began to build up again at the thought that Naruto would leave her too, but you've never once said anything. How should I have known that it hurt you? You tell me to stay away from you, but you still talk to me when you need something. Either to lecture me, call me names, or just to rant when you're upset. Forgive me for being a little confused, he finished sarcastically. Sakura wanted to refute his claim, but she knew it was true. Naruto was annoying and persistent, but she preferred picking on him much more than keeping away from him. He was an easy target for her, and it really helped her self-esteem issues. The fact that Naruto never protested or retaliated encouraged her to do so. She felt a wave of guilt pass through her. Naruto. To her surprise, Naruto suddenly smiled. Team 7 may be filled with bad memories, but, despite everything, I still consider Team 7 my family. I don't hate Sasuke, and neither do I hate you. But right now, I'm angry at both of you because you both have broken my trust. So, this is the end. Sakura said sadly. I didn't say that either, Naruto countered with a shake of his head. You're my teammate and my friend. I'm willing to give you a chance, but you'll have to work for it. Naruto, thank you, she said before she slowly smiled. But, what about Sasuke? She asked cautiously. Are you really not friends anymore? Naruto turned to look out the window. It's complicated. I talked to Kakashi-sensei and I don't hate Sasuke. But knowing that if anybody else had been in my position, if anybody else had been hit by the Chidori, they'd be in the morgue right now. You may not like this Sakura, but Sasuke, he means nothing for me now. If I keep chasing him, I'll be stuck and I'll never get anywhere in life. He admitted, causing Sakura's head to fall. I really don't know what he means to you, Sakura. Maybe he's important enough to you that you want him back. I won't try to stop you from doing that, but if you do intend to do it, I'll do everything I can to help you, but only if you promise me something. Anything, she replied, her eyes steeling themselves with a renewed resolve. Train hard under Bachan. She's a great ninja and there's a lot you can learn from her. Train hard enough so you can protect yourself. I promise, Naruto, she said softly. I'll catch up to the both of you, that's a promise. I'll be waiting, Naruto smirked as she walked out the door. As soon as she exited, a voice spoke from the window. Glad to see you got some sense knocked into you. Naruto turned. Arrow, he stopped himself, shaking his head. Sorry, I meant Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow to this. Not that I don't appreciate it, but why? He asked. I've been acting like a snot-nosed brat. You may be a pervert, but it doesn't take away the fact that you're a legendary ninja who took time away to teach some stuck-up brat. Naruto bowed slightly. Sorry, Jiraiya-sensei. I promise I'll show the respect you deserve. I'll train hard and learn anything you have to teach me. Jiraiya considered his student slightly before smiling and rubbing his head. Easy there, kid. I appreciate the sentiment, he stated with a chuckle. I came to see how you were doing and to tell you a few things. He took a seat on the chair near the bed. I'm glad you aren't chasing after the Uchiha brat. It would have led you nowhere. Is that what happened with you? Naruto asked curiously, remembering the story of the 3 Sannin. Jiraiya nodded sadly. It was. I chased Orochimaru's shadow for many years, too many years. Years that were wasted by an endless ghost hunt. I acted like a child and refused to look at the facts. He had made his choices and nothing I could do would deter him. I sacrificed far too much, and my biggest regret is not growing up sooner to realize what a waste it was. They say a student must always aim to surpass the master. You've already set on that path, which is good and all, but we have to speed it up. Why is that? You remember when Itachi and Kisame came after you? Naruto nodded. Yeah, they were with some type of group. Wasn't it called Akatsuki? That's it. See, they are after the Biju sealed within you for unknown reasons. This only means that they will come after you for the Kyuubi eventually. Naruto's eyes widened. So Itachi and Kisame will come after me again? Just how strong are they? Jiraiya couldn't help but smile at the sudden maturity he was starting to show. Normally he'd be yelling childishly how he'd kick their asses and train super hard. But he was using his head now, a great sign. They are powerful, both of them are individually stronger than Orochimaru. To put that into context, Orochimaru is somebody that even Kakashi would stand no chance of beating. Naruto shut his eyes, recalling his encounter with the Snake Sannin in the Forest of Death. He had tossed him around even with the Kyuubi's power with no effort at all. And if 2 people were higher than that were after him, then he considered the gap between himself and his own sensei. The very notion of somebody as powerful as Kakashi being that outclassed was jarring. I can't fight people like them. Not yet, at least, Naruto admitted. And it's good you realize that. We can't know for sure what they want with the Biju, but it can't be for anything good. They will come for you eventually and they will do anything to get it, but it isn't just them you need to worry about. God, there's so much I need to teach you about. You need to be ready because this is one cutthroat world and Konoha is at far more risk than anyone realizes. You need to be prepared for what is coming. I want you to travel with me for 3 years so I can teach you and show you the world. Naruto clenched his fists lightly. I don't want to lose my comrades. We all should have died on that last mission. I don't ever want to feel like that again. He looked up with resolve in his eyes. When do we leave? In about 4 to 6 weeks. Kakashi will be overlooking you training in that time, if that's okay with you. Of course, it is. He is my Jonin sensei after all. You aren't mad that he left you train the Uchiha alone for an entire month. Maybe a bit, but we made our peace. I know that deep down he meant well and I just want to move forward. He's still my sensei despite everything, Naruto replied. Jiraiya nodded. That's good, you've done well kid. I'm proud of you. Naruto smiled. Thank you, sensei. September 21st. Yo, Kakashi said as he appeared in a swirl of leaves. Hey Kakashi-sensei, Naruto greeted. No yelling I was late? Kakashi asked rather perplexed. Would it make a difference? He shrugged. No, not really. It was entertaining while it lasted, Kakashi sighed, but on to business right now. We don't have much time and we need to brush up on all your basics as quickly as possible, Kakashi said as he pulled out several books and scrolls. Naruto gulped. That's quite a bit. Well, you did get started on it, so might as well finish it off. This is everything you missed in the academy. But in the interest of saving time, I'm going to give you a training aid that only you will be able to use. What is it? Naruto asked interested. Kakashi eyes smiled. Why, your favorite just you of course. September 26th. Ready Naruto? Iruka asked. You have an hour, your time begins now. The Chunin watched as his former student sat at his desk attempting the academy written exam again. Kakashi wanted to get an accurate measure of how well Naruto picked up while studying. It was rather odd that the Jonin insisted on him using a test he had made rather than the standard one, but Iruka was rather used to the various eccentricities among ninja. He still expected Naruto to show just a slight improvement from his academy days. Instead, he found himself surprised at seeing a calm and collected Naruto slowly writing down answers while taking the occasional pause to think. The very same Naruto who would be pulling his hair out and scribbling whatever came to mind at the last second. He really had grown. The hour passed quickly and Iruka collected the paper from Naruto. He corrected the questions quickly without realizing there was rather large difference between Kakashi's test and the academy's. At the end he put down his pen. Well, what do you think Naruto? He scratched the back of his head. It wasn't as bad as it used to be. I still have a lot of gaps, but I'll keep studying so they don't stay. Iruka smiled. It's almost hard to believe that you're the same brat who used to pull pranks all the time. Congrats Naruto, you got an 84%, he said. Naruto gaped slightly. Okay, I was not expecting that high, he said. This is remarkable Naruto. After just a week you've got more than 5 times your average score. More like after a month, Naruto thought, remembering himself using 3 clones to increase his pace 4-fold. His math wasn't very good, but he was sure that was how long he'd studied. That certainly was a surprise, Kakashi stated, bored by the door, especially given this was genin level material, not academy. I wonder if Iruka realized yet, he thought. Hey Kakashi-sensei, I actually passed the test, Naruto grinned. Good for you. Thanks again Iruka-sensei, Kakashi stated. It's no problem at all Kakashi-sensei. Naruto, if you ever need any help at all, my door is open. I know. Thanks, Iruka-sensei. See you. Take care Naruto. Naruto turned to Kakashi. What's next Kakashi-sensei? Well, we've worked on your theory for the past week and it's acceptable for a genin by my standards. We've got a few more weeks, so we'll work on ironing out all your practical skills. We'll begin with you taijutsu katas since that takes the most time. Can I use cage bunchins to help me train with taijutsu? We've been over this, clones don't help with physical training. And I've warned you about turning them into a crutch. You'll become less observant if you rely on accumulated memories to improve. Naruto hung his head slightly. Sorry sensei. It's just I get frustrated sometimes. It's annoying because I struggle to learn simple stuff. Apparently you haven't noticed. Noticed what? You may take your time with the more basic skills, but you have a great knack for picking up advanced skills. It took me a year to learn the Rasengan with personal help from Minato-sensei, the man who created it. Not just that, it took me 2 days to learn the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and several weeks to master it. Naruto's eyes widened. So, I'm not really stupid? Childish perhaps, but no, you're not stupid. Don't believe that even for a second. Naruto smiled brightly at that. If that's the case, then I'll bear these stupid things. Let's get started sensei. Easy. You won't learn anything in such a rush. Let's go over your katas and I'll help you where I have like I usually do. Naruto nodded and began to slowly perform his katas. Kakashi would occasionally nudge and prod his motions to make them smoother. Watching him now, he couldn't help but contrast just how atrocious his technique had been when he first became a genin. He had power and speed but his form so severely lacking that he was effectively a flailing dummy. He worked unwaveringly hard to get this far. His taijutsu was still far from perfect but the level of improvement was a far cry than what could be expected of a dead last. In fact, he was improving at a rate far higher than the average. It still irritated him that Naruto's education was neglected in his academy days. He never liked that Iruka fellow for that reason. Sure, he was nice to Naruto, but buying a bowl of ramen was meaningless if you were sending an underprepared kid out into the field. It was practically a death sentence. He wasn't any better. He had done the bare minimum and rationalized it as Naruto having a poor attitude for a ninja. How the hell was he supposed to know the right attitude when nobody had raised or trained him? When you had to raise yourself and learn anything without anybody's help, there were bound to be gaps in their knowledge and behavior. Especially when you lived in a village that loathed you. It was fair to expect Sakura and Sasuke to take the initiative and ask him for help, but Naruto was so obviously emotionally stunted. The Sandaime had been more than happy to keep him that way because it kept him docile and loyal to him. But Tsunade had been the first one to point out how dangerous and hypocritical it was given how many unfair expectations they were laying on him over a legacy he wasn't even aware he possessed. What if somebody from Kumo promised the boy they'd tell him about his parents? Even if they didn't know anything, it was far too easy to give him false promises because he was molded to act naive and impulsively. The disaster of Kumo having 3 Jinchuriki was something that made even him feel nauseous. He always imagined how differently Naruto would have been raised if Minato or Kushina were alive. He would have been twice the shinobi he was now, and considering everything he had achieved despite all his handicaps. But there was no point talking about what-ifs. Mistakes had been made and the best way forward was to learn from them and avoid repeating them in the future. What he had to do right now was put everything he had into preparing Naruto to be trained by Jiraiya for the next 3 years. This should have been happening in all these months prior instead of in a 3-week crash course. This all highlighted one thing that had been plaguing him for the past week. Just what had he been doing as a Jonin sensei? His Sharingan no Kakashi hype had gone to his head. He was still a damn powerful ninja but nowhere close to where he should or could be. His skills had slipped since he left Anbu and his judgment had been skewed. His first encounter with Zabuza highlighted nearly all his problems. Nukenin were constantly on the run from bounty hunters and hunter nin. Their skills often tended to suffer unless they were S-rankers who tended to be damn near impossible to track. Kakashi may have defeated Zabuza both times, but the manner in which he did so was pathetic. It should have gone much differently. Without being captured, without involving his genin, without passing out, without being fooled by the fake hunter nin. His genin should have died on their first mission. He knew it. His genin had only survived because of luck and their inherent talent. And then what did he do to prepare them after? He taught them only tree walking. Granted, it was an important skill, but it wasn't enough for a situation like that. That boy, Haku, was easily a Jonin-level shinobi. Sasuke and Naruto both should have been 6 feet under the ground. If not for the Kyuubi, it would have been the case. They were saved not because of his mentorship, rather by the ingeniousness of a man who had passed away more than a decade ago. A man who was younger than him and had been a shinobi for shorter time than he had. And the issues were just getting started. There was signing them up for the Chunin exams when he knew that they weren't ready. Sealing Sasuke's curse mark without advice from the Hokage or Jiraiya. Recklessly threatening Orochimaru, a person who could have killed him 20 times over. Allowing Kabuto to get away at the hospital. Teaching Sasuke the Chidori, not bothering to check if Orochimaru had minders on Sasuke before he left on mission. Yup, a long, long list of mistakes for the so-called best Jonin of the village. But Kakashi wasn't one to sulk despite what people thought. He had got as far as he did because he was somebody who learned from his mistakes and kept adapting. It may have slowed down over the past few years, but that ability never faded. All his instincts were screaming at him to get far, far stronger. It stretched beyond just the Akatsuki. Some people may call it a cynical worldview, but Kakashi always believed that war was a constant of their shinobi system, with the only variable being how long between each one. And Naruto was going to face the brunt of all of these threats. No matter how strong he could get, he couldn't do it alone. He would need him, if not as a sensei then as a commander, a comrade, a senior and a friend. He was less than useless as he was now. There were shinobi out there who were in the same class as Itachi, and as he was now he was useless against them. Minato-sensei would have had Itachi running for the hills. Even Tu-san would have pushed him to his limits. He was both their legacies. If they could match such an incredible shinobi, then so would he. He had to, because no matter what he wouldn't allow a comrade to die, much less his precious student. With that thought, Kakashi resolved himself stronger than he had ever been before. He'd be better no matter what. It was time the copy ninja, Kakashi no Sharingan, lived up to his hype as a legend. He'd be stronger to protect the future of Konoha. He'd be there to support Naruto all the way through it. That was a promise. I know Naruto's birthday happens in this period, but I can't think of any way to add it to the story without getting too convoluted. So, his birthday happens off-panel where he spends the day with Shizune and Tsunade. October 25th. He's improved quite a bit, wouldn't you say, Jiraiya-sama? Kakashi spoke in a bored tone, glancing backwards at the trees behind him. The Toad Sage sprung forward and stood beside Kakashi. Both men remained silent, watching the three genin sparring in front of them. Naruto, Neji and Lee, the three strongest genin in Konoha at the moment, facing off in a battle royale. Neji with his prodigious Juken and Byakugan, Rock Lee with his freakish speed and the hard-hitting Goken, and finally Naruto with clones and a whole bag of tricks and deception. It was quite a spectacle. Guy watched carefully from the other end, keeping himself close enough to intervene in case things went too far. He really has. His technique looks convincing now, though he didn't really need it to be. True, but he was willing to make the effort. Something about traitorous, idiotic taijutsu instructors sabotaging him for several years. Jiraiya winced lightly. People never realize the value of proper instruction until they're deprived of it. The two continued to watch the battle. Naruto deftly avoided a Juken blow, causing it to strike Lee in the stomach, which unfortunately deviated the path of his kick straight into Naruto, who was sent flying into Neji's legs. The three struggled up from the ground as they began to fight it out again. What of his ninjutsu and chakra control? He asked. His chakra control has improved by quite a bit. He got the idea of practicing the Rasengan while walking on water. If he keeps it up that way, he may be able to perform it one-handed soon. Apart from that, I had him work on perfecting his hand signs and practice all his jutsu except Kachiyose. I see. Did you teach him any new jutsu? Kakashi nodded. I taught him Shuriken Kage Bunshin since he's proficient with Kage Bunshins. He somewhat figured out the Shunshin no Jutsu by himself, so I helped him perfect it. You said figured out? Yeah, he taught it himself just from observation, Kakashi explained, and a rudimentary explanation of how it feels. Interesting. Have you tested his chakra nature? Natures, Kakashi corrected. He's got a primary futon and minor Raiden affinity. Nothing's ever normal with him, is it? Without a Kekai Genkei, having a secondary affinity is astronomical. Anything else you want to add? Kakashi nodded. He's gained interest in Fuinjutsu. I wasn't sure on how to get him started, so I figured it's best to leave that aspect of his training to you. Though I had him start practicing his calligraphy and handwriting extensively. What got him into it? Apparently Tsunade-sama taught him a bit. He got slightly interested, but mostly it was after he found out the Hiraishin no Jutsu is based on Fuinjutsu. Somebody will have their hands full now, Kakashi grinned. Fitting indeed, Jiraiya said with his own grin. Well, it's time for us to go meet Tsunade-hime. She has something very important to tell Naruto. Kakashi paused for a moment before asking, it wouldn't be about that, would it? Jiraiya smiled lightly before nodding, just as Naruto walked towards them. Hey Kakashi-sensei, Jiraiya-sensei. What's up? Come on kid, the two of us going to see Tsunade-hime. There's something very important she wants to tell you. Naruto's brow furrowed. What is it? Jiraiya smiled wide. A secret, he chirped, much to Naruto's annoyance. Hey Bachan, you wanted to see us? Naruto asked. Tsunade nodded. Yes Naruto. Come in, she said as she began to activate several seals. Naruto noticed a rather thick-looking barrier appear around the room. Even subtle movements created an echo against it. A sound barrier? Otherwise known as a privacy barrier. But that isn't important. What we're here to tell you about is, it's about your parents, Naruto. His eyes shot wide. What? His body was tensed as he felt a cold shiver pass through him. Sarutobi-sensei really wanted to tell you Naruto, but you were a child and we couldn't trust you with that information. Your parents were powerful and with many enemies. If your heritage was publicly known, you'd have to deal with not only enemies from outside but inside as well. Naruto became confused. Inside? Why would people in Konoha attack me? Jiraiya shook his head. Not enemies in the conventional sense. Rather they would have tried to use you for their own ends, he explained. Oh, okay. You've probably been afraid that they abandoned you, but they didn't. They both passed away during the Kyuubi attack, Tsunade told him. Naruto felt a huge weight lift from him. Tsunade slowly brought out a small picture. This is your mother, her name was Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto shakily grasped the image. Seeing the image, he began to cry immediately. Ka-chan, she was so beautiful. She was an incredible woman. Known as the Akai Chishio Habanero. Strong, fierce yet the most loving person I've met. While she was pregnant with you, she had never been happier in her life, Jiraiya spoke sadly. Naruto forcefully wiped his tears. Did she really? She wouldn't care about. No, and I know she never will. Naruto nodded slowly before asking, and what about Mai? He froze when he looked at the picture of the Yondaime. It clicked. When he was younger he had suspected it due to their similarities. But he had brushed it off due to their differing last names as well as the fact that he thought that nobody could possibly hate the son of their greatest hero. It was all just a fantasy to him. It was just like a children's story where the orphaned loser was secretly a prince. Wait, Uzumaki is my mother's name. She has red hair and violet eyes. I have blue eyes and blonde hair. No, he said, eyes widened. Naruto? No, 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 he began chanting, gripping his head. Both watched on as Naruto began to shake his head fervently. No, it can't be. He was a great man. He'd never do something like that to his own son, he yelled, crying wildly. Tsunade looked away, head down. Jiraiya sighed, understanding just how shocking such news could be. Jiraiya spoke. He was the Hokage. His duty was to protect the village. If he couldn't sacrifice his own son, how could he ask someone else? I don't know what to think. Did he know? Did he know that everybody would hate me? He truly believed in the village. He believed that they would heed his final words to view you as a hero. But he did this in the knowledge that your mother was the previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Naruto's heart nearly stopped. What? He asked very softly. She had a special bloodline that could suppress a Biju's chakra. During childbirth, the seal holding a Biju is weakened. On the night of your birth, something went wrong, causing the Kyuubi to be released. Once the Biju is released or extracted from the Jinchuriki, it always results in death. Minato sealed the Kyuubi within you, because destroying it was simply a temporary solution. All it would achieve would be to piss it off before it reformed in a few years. He took the best of the worst choices. Both of them died weeping. They shed tears for their son who they left alone. For what it's worth, they wanted nothing more than to live with you, for you. Naruto shut his eyes tightly. I understand, but I don't think I can ever forgive him, he said softly. Neither replied. Naruto shook his head. I don't understand one thing though. Ka-chan helped stop the Kyuubi as well. Nobody calls her a hero, nobody remembers her. So, what are you saying? She deserved much better than that. I may really be Namikaze Naruto, but I won't take the name. I was born in Uzumaki, lived in Uzumaki, and I will die in Uzumaki, he declared. Tsunade smiled gently at that. She'd have been so proud of you for that, but are you alright, Naruto? I'm just a little angry, Bachan. Is there anything they've left for me? There is actually. They saved up a good amount of money which was transferred to your account when you made Genin. They had a small house too. You can move in there if you want, Jiraiya said. Maybe not yet, I don't think I'm ready. Do you have any pictures of Tu-chan and Ka-chan together? He asked. Jiraiya nodded and retrieved one last picture. It was one of a pregnant Kushina, with Minato lying his head on her tummy. Naruto touched the photo close to his chest with his eyes shut. Few moments passed before a serene smile appeared on his face. Their love and their will lived on in me. From the Kiroi Senko and the Akai Chishio Habanero comes the future Konoha's Orange Hokage. I'll live up to both their legacies and become the greatest Hokage ever. That's a promise, he said with a wide grin. Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged proud smiles as they watched Naruto adoringly look at the photo. November 1st. Well, I guess this is it, guys, Naruto spoke. He looked over all the rookies and all Jonin senseis, obviously except Kakashi, assembled near the gate. I will be looking forward to a most youthful fight when you return, Naruto-kun. May the flames of youth burn bright within you. Well said, Student Lee. I wish you luck as well, Naruto-kun. Allow your burning passion to explode with all its power and you will become a most youthful ninja. Neji and Tenten sighed, in simple terms. Have a great trip and train hard to become a great ninja, Tenten explained, embarrassed. Naruto smiled, thanks guys. He turned to Team 8. Hey, don't get too. We'll surpass you in no. He started until he was elbowed rather hard by Kurenai. What he means to say is we'll miss having you. Be safe and have a wonderful journey, Kurenai said with a smile. Indeed, your enthusiasm and energy will be missed. Have a safe trip, Naruto, Shino added with a nod. Thanks Kurenai-sensei, thanks Shino. You're a prick but thanks Kiba. He turned to Hinata who seemed on the verge of tears. Huh? What's the matter, Hinata? Nothing. I'll miss you, Naruto-kun, she whispered. I'll miss you guys too. Don't worry, 3 years will go in a flash, he said reassuringly. Hinata smiled gently. She wanted to say more but her head fell slightly when she realized that Naruto had shifted his attention to Team 10. She felt a comforting hand from Kurenai on her shoulder. There's always time, don't worry. Hinata nodded, feeling slightly better. Good luck, Naruto, Choji started. Don't do anything too troublesome, Shikamaru cut in. Ino twitched slightly. Is that all you have to say? Shikamaru sighed. Fine, fine. You're a real troublesome guy, but things will be a bit dull around here with you gone. I get it, guys. Thanks, Naruto cut in before another argument broke out. Slowly he turned to his last remaining teammate. Sakura seemed a bit reserved. So, this is it for Team 7? She asked quietly. Naruto's head hung slightly before it shot up with a bright grin. Nah. We're teammates no matter what, Sakura. Any team with us is the best. Sakura smiled. Definitely, better train hard, Naruto, or I'll leave you in the dust. Just you try, he chirped, and Kakashi appeared just that moment. Yo, you're on time? Naruto voiced everyone's thoughts. Kakashi simply ignored the odd looks as he eyes smiled. Ma, can't miss my cute little Genin leaving, can I? Besides, I got a little something for you, he said, tossing him a scroll. Naruto blinked slightly. Is this? Kakashi nodded. Yup. Stay safe, I'll be waiting to see how strong you've gotten when you return. Naruto grinned. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei. He finally turned to Tsunade and Shizune. Shizune bent down and gave him a tight hug. Stay safe, Naruto-kun. We'll all be waiting for you to be back. Naruto hugged her back. Of course, Nei-chan. I'll be back in top shape, don't you worry. Letting go off the embrace, he finally turned to Tsunade, whose face was stoic. When their eyes met, Tsunade's face softened as she bent down to come face to face with Naruto. Stay safe, okay? Listen to Jiraiya and train hard every day, but make sure you rest enough and don't overdo it. I better not hear you got hurt or you'll piss me off. And don't you dare pick up any habits from this old lecher. Stay away from the 3 vices. Save your money and spend it wisely. No girls or sake till you're 18, understood? She said as her voice got louder and more threatening with each sentence, causing everybody to sweat drop. Naruto was blushed hard, causing several to snicker at his expense. Bachan. I'll never turn out like Ero Sennin. Promise. Good. Come back in one piece. I'm holding your hat for you, she said, hugging him tightly. I will, Naruto said, hugging her back. I'll save you from paperwork, don't you worry. Naruto let go and gave a final wave. See you, everybody. Bye, Naruto. The two walked slowly past the gate. Naruto didn't turn back. He was psyched for the 3 years to come. He smiled confidently as he walked side by side with his sensei. Seeing him so upbeat, Jiraiya smiled. So, you excited, kid? Naruto nodded. Yeah, I am. So, what's the plan? We'll find a nearby city and we'll start planning, but most likely it'll be by the year. Once that's done, we'll get right into training. I have 3 years to get you as strong as possible and I don't intend to waste a single moment. Me neither. The Akatsuki won't know what hit them. November 3rd. Leaving Konoha had been a lot more difficult than he had expected. Not seeing his home for 3 years left him craving to stay behind for a little longer. But he steeled himself and walked without ever turning back. Regrets and uncertainty, that just wasn't his style. So, he traveled forward with his head held high, brimming with anticipation of growing stronger. Unwanted negativity was suppressed not with a naive daydream, rather with faith that his situation would truly improve. It filled him with a calm energy that gave him a skip in his step but didn't have him bouncing off the walls like an endless ball of energy. The pair stopped at a nearby town within Hai no Kuni when the sun had begun to set. It had been a relatively quiet travel, with Naruto taking the time away from training and the village to come to terms with what was happening. He was out on a 3-year training trip with a legendary Sannin and his godfather. He couldn't have been more excited in his life. Despite his disrespectful behavior towards him, Naruto looked up to Jiraiya. The way he carried himself as a person and a ninja was always the way Naruto saw himself in the future. Having an idol in real life to emulate and learn from was truly an exciting prospect. Then there was the fact that he could finally learn more about his parents. Jiraiya knew them very well, and he planned on pulling every single piece of information available on the two of them. He had heard tall tales of his father the ninja, but he was more interested in his father as a man. Was he kind? Was he intelligent? Was he a lover of ramen? But he desperately wanted to know more about his mother. The woman he was said to take after. The woman who nobody talked about or acknowledged as a hero. The woman who he knew absolutely nothing about. The woman who had given her life to save his own. He always held a suspicion over his father's identity, but he never had the slightest clue who his mother could be. Knowing that she had indeed passed and hadn't abandoned him had been relieving. Other kids would always taunt him over the fact that he had no parents, and the worst of these was when they called his mother a dirty whore who abandoned him. Even if you ignored it, a small part of you would always wonder whether it was the truth. The only person he trusted would only tell him she was dead, and there was no point bothering about who she was. None of that mattered anymore. He knew who his parents were. He knew they loved him enough to give their lives for him. Maybe he'd never forgive his father for sealing the Kyuubi within him, but it didn't matter anymore. He now knew who he was and where he came from. He'd make them both proud. But at the same time there was an overwhelmingly strong sense of anxiety. It was a lot easier to brush the Akatsuki off when they weren't after you and when you weren't so far below their level. They were the best of ninja, meaning they'd be willing to do anything to achieve their goals. His village and comrades would come under fire. He didn't want to let everybody who'd placed their faith in him, his parents, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Kakashi or Iruka. He'd train hard and learn everything he could. He'd practice every day and train by himself also if he had to. No matter what, he would get strong. He had to. There simply wasn't a choice. The Akatsuki were after all 9 of the Biju. He'd seen the power the Ichibi held firsthand, and if what Gamabunta had suggested was correct, then it wasn't the full extent. He'd felt the Kyuubi's power when it flowed through him. The amount he'd been able to use so far was akin to using a cup from an entire ocean. If such a minute amount held such frightening power, just how strong was the fox? Just how strong were all 9 of them? One alone could easily destroy a hidden village. Kyuubi was plenty evidence of that, and even Shukaku was perfectly capable of doing so. He shivered thinking of the destruction all that power could accomplish. A nation? A region? Maybe even the world. And if what he knew about the Biju was correct, Kyuubi was the most powerful. If anybody wanted so much power under their control, they were up to no good. Getting strong could mean the difference between his village standing and it burnt to ashes. This realization hit him almost as hard as finding out about the Kyuubi or his parents. Thinking of the Akatsuki, he realized he couldn't comprehend just how strong they were. All he knew was that they were stronger than Kakashi-sensei, but by how much? That wasn't the only issue. What were their specialties? What kind of jutsu did they have? What secret abilities did they have? He almost wished he could go back to his childish mindset. Things were so much easier then. Throw his fist first, ask questions later. But having been a shinobi for close to a year, he'd realized just how much deception and subtlety factored into their lifestyles. But at times he just didn't understand how it helped at all. Jiraiya was a good example. He acted like a complete goof for somebody considered a legend. But then there was the fact that he was ridiculously strong. Itachi and Kisame had bolted the minute he showed up. Why act the fool if you're so damn powerful to scare off 2 guys like that? Why make people think you're useless? It didn't sit right with him at all. Hey sensei? What? You're a super strong ninja, a legend, but you act like a complete goof. It took me a long time to realize just how strong you are, but why do you do it? For that very reason. I don't get it. See, if you were to encounter Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin or Jiraiya the hopeless pervert, who will you take seriously? The Sannin. Exactly. See, people are thrown off when they see me goofing around. They assume that my reputation is bogus and I'm a hopeless idiot. They don't take me seriously. That's the beauty of it. They underestimate me and I end them before they right themselves. But the smarter and stronger ones tend to be scared off by my accomplishments and abilities. That's brilliant. You know, you seem to be on the same path, albeit unintentionally. That orange jumpsuit of yours really helps. Do people really not take me seriously? Naruto asked, deflating. You know, I did a lot of these things just so people would look at me. Just feel it wasn't worth it now, sort of. Because people have a certain image of you. Yeah, screw them, eh? If people refuse to change their view of you despite proving otherwise again and again, there's really nothing you can do. What if you keep trying until they do? That's arrogance. Nobody can outright control another person's actions or thoughts. You can influence them, manipulate them, but it's never absolute. You are great at influencing people. But you can't change their thoughts for them. They do it when they understand what you're trying to tell them. If you go about life thinking you can win over every person, then you'll die as a fool. Then how will I become Hokage? Jiraiya snorted, easily enough. The Hokages weren't gods. They were humans who made a lot of mistakes. Who said you have to win over every soul to become Hokage? Iwa never forgave your father yet he still became Hokage. This is so confusing. This is life, kid. You're just 13 and you have plenty of time to figure it out. Learn to worry less and live a little. Hey, at least I'm thinking now. That's an improvement, right? Jiraiya gave a boisterous laugh. Never lose your optimism, Naruto. It really makes my day. His grin didn't fade for the rest of the night. November 4th. Jiraiya slowly walked into the nearby training field. As he had expected, he found Naruto waiting for him, but he was lightly drenched in sweat, indicating he had been training beforehand. Ready to begin? He asked. Hi. Naruto nodded. Good. Now you've done several exercises on chakra control and read a bit on it, correct? Yeah, but it's always a bit hard for me. It's because I have a lot of chakra, right? Think of it this way. To fill half a cup of water, is it easier to use a tap or use a stream? A tap. Now most jutsu require very specific amounts of chakra, though depending on the rank or type they may be relatively flexible. Most supplementary ninjutsu are quite flexible, while something like genjutsu or Iryo ninjutsu require pinpoint precision. Are you following me so far? Naruto nodded. Good. In absolute terms your chakra control is average, but in relative terms you have almost prodigious control given your reserves. If your absolute chakra control reaches Jonin levels, then you'll become a literal juggernaut. Since I have so much chakra, I can fill way more cups than other people if I don't waste most of it. That's the gist of it. So how do I get started? You already have the ultimate tool for training your chakra control. Naruto furrowed his eyebrow in thought. What could it be? Cage bunchins? While they were helpful in speeding up training, it didn't sound like exactly what Jiraiya had in mind. Wait, the Rasengan? Yes. As I've told you before, the Rasengan is the highest level of shape manipulation. Shape manipulation is a form of chakra control. The first step is to be able to do it one-handed without using either cage bunchins or your other hand. I can do that, it just takes a lot of focus and time, he muttered. Naruto held out his hand and focused hard. He pictured the blue sphere materializing in his hands. He felt his chakras slowly swirl in his hands, building up. Rasengan! He cried out as it appeared. He took a deep breath and wiped the drops of sweat on his forehead. Well, that's an improvement, but you need to be much faster. The entire point of this jutsu is to deal massive damage instantaneously. That will be your training for now. Your Rasengan needs to be formed within the blink of an eye. You can use 4 cage bunchins to help you train. Why 4? I can do a lot more. Like Kakashi said, not only is there a mental strain that comes with it, but it shouldn't become a crutch. You'll become less observant because you'll just depend on the memory of your clones. I will allow you to use them in your training when you are attempting to master a skill or technique, since we're pressed for time. If you're learning anything new or developing a skill, it has to be done perfectly. More than that, with too many clones you'll make small mistakes that eventually become habits, which are weaknesses enemies will exploit. I understand. Is there any other training I have to do? Kid, I'm not going to babysit you and tell you what to do. I'll guide you and teach you new things, but you have to develop yourself. You're a ninja, not a child. You have to maintain your own training regimen along with whatever material I have you working on. Sounds like a lot. It will be. This is a training trip, Naruto. You'll spend most of your time training. I can live with that. Alright, let's do this. Naruto declared with determination. Producing 4 clones, he immediately began to focus on his training again. Jiraiya, noting Naruto's focus was on his training, leapt up into one of the nearby trees. He carefully positioned himself so he was out of earshot and so Naruto would have a hard time spotting him while he could keep watch of him. Slowly suppressing his chakra, he shifted to the branch several meters away, where a murder of crows coalesced to reveal the figure of Uchiha Itachi. Jiraiya-sama, he greeted. Hello Itachi, he replied. Itachi slipped a scroll which Jiraiya discreetly put into his robe. His Sharingan slowly shifted to the scene down below, as they slowly followed his movements. After a moment he spoke. He's grown. It was bound to happen. Though we should be thankful it was sooner rather than later. Indeed, it appears Sasuke played a role in it. Who's in Orochimaru's hands now? I expected you to be a bit more proactive. Tobi would jump at the chance to use Sasuke as a hostage. It's only Pain's word that stays his hand, as he prefers to leave Orochimaru to his own devices at the moment. I see. I must say it is an interesting dynamic you three have. I certainly didn't expect you to leave a man such as that to his schemes. I would kill Tobi, but that would incite Pain. That man is too dangerous to be left unchecked, and should he move I may be the only forewarning for it. It took me years to even begin to comprehend his power. The Rinnegan truly is a frightening power. You truly believe that this man was once your student? The Rinnegan was supposed to be a myth, Itachi. What are the chances of it appearing twice in a lifetime within the same country? Knowing Konan is a member, either Yahiko or Nagato wouldn't be far behind. There is also the fact that Dujutsu are not easily transplanted. Uzumaki Nagato is Pain's true identity. This confirms our theory on Danzo's involvement in AIM. Has he made any movements of late? He's been keeping tight-lipped since the invasion. Orochimaru was a widely known associate of his, and his rise would have raised far too many questions. Tsunadeheim will handle him. He is a dangerous man. Don't worry yourself over it. Tsunadeheim may not seem like it, but she's one of the most devious people I know. She'll handle Danzo. If you say so, Jiraiya-sama. If I may ask, how do you intend on carrying his training forward? That's a whole boat of problems right there. The kid's actually a lot sharper than I realized, and he's using cage bunchins. He's picking onto things almost as fast as Minato did. I see, but even then, 3 years is much too short a time to become an S-rank ninja. Don't remind me. I intended to use Kyuubi's chakra to bring him up to speed, but Tsunade pointed out you guys are after Jinchuriki and Biju. Indeed, between my Genjutsu and Kisami's Samahata, he wouldn't even have a chance to use Kyuubi's chakra. Have you considered teaching him Senjutsu? He is a toad summoner after all. There are more requirements than just being a toad summoner, but I never considered it as an option. Senjutsu would certainly close the gap. Jiraiya contemplated. See, you do good work. Happy to help, Itachi stated dryly. I am out of chakra now. Until next time, Jiraiya-sama, Itachi spoke before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. For an 18-year-old he's far too morbid, Jiraiya muttered to himself. Even Minato at 18 was a bright, cheerful man, more concerned about making his girlfriend happy than world-threatening scenarios. Uchiha Itachi to Jiraiya represented everything wrong with the shinobi world and every reason to fight for peace. He didn't know too much about him until after the Uchiha massacre. As a professional, he was someone any shinobi would delight in working with. Disciplined, professional, efficient and straightforward. But as a person you could just see how disturbed he was if you were able to see past the thick mask of stoicism. A pacifist who detested conflict, forced to murder his own clan and go rogue. The fact that he was functioning in itself was a miracle. Lesser shinobi had broken over more trivial events. As a ninja, Itachi was the cream of the crop, but as a person he was likely too broken to ever live even a normal shinobi life. It was probably a mercy that he'd contracted such a terminal illness. After facing so much suffering and loss, death was likely the only place he'd ever find peace. He glanced down at his student who was hard at work. He couldn't help but ponder what steps Naruto would have taken against the Uchiha coup d'etat, had he been Hokage. Minato would have no doubt confronted them directly and pushed for a peaceful resolution no matter the cost. Sarutobi-sensei would have pushed for peaceful negotiations at first, but if they fell through, he would have dealt with the instigators harshly. He may have been a forgiving person, but he knew when to withhold mercy. The Sandame's wrath was arguably one of the worst you could face in the world. He snorted at the thought of what Danzo would do. In a way, the old bastard had gotten his way, but Itachi had the last laugh since he was free of his jurisdiction. There was nothing he could legally do against Itachi. It made him wonder whether that's why he had pushed Sasuke into departing for Orochimaru. Danzo, unlike Orochimaru, was well connected within Konoha. They couldn't just disappear him since he was well known within the courts of the Fire Daimyo. They might be civilians, but they weren't naive. Being Konoha's primary benefactor and client, if news of a well-placed village elder being assassinated got out, they'd lose a large portion of their highest-paying clients, which would be disastrous. This meant that the only way to take Danzo down was with solid evidence, but another problem arose. Sarutobi-sensei had turned a blind eye so long that he had learned every possible way of covering himself both politically and legally. It hadn't taken long for both Tsunade and Jiraiya to agree following the former's ascension that he had to be dealt with. As useful as he was, he only caused more harm to the village from his actions. Then there was the fact that he had made his interest in training Naruto rather vocal since his birth. It was one of the few privileged times he got to hear Tsunade cuss as she hissed a sharp, "Oh fuck no." But it all ultimately boiled down to one thing. Regardless of who it was, an innocent 13-year-old or a hardened 18-year-old, it was the way of their village to protect the next generation, even if it came at the cost of their lives. And Jiraiya was prepared to do exactly that when the time arrived. Naruto panted and held his hand out. Focusing, he called out, "Rasengan." In an instant a perfect sphere of blue chakra appeared in his palm. He smiled, "Yes, finally got it." Dispelling the technique, he crossed his fingers and did the same for his clones. He took a sharp breath as he felt a rapid influx of memories. Sifting through it quickly, he made a conscious effort to remember only relevant information. Opening his eyes up, he held out his hand again. "Rasengan," he said much more gently as the technique formed with even more ease. The chakra slowly spun slower and shrunk before it disappeared. With a huff, Naruto collapsed to the ground exhausted. "Finally got it down, huh? You weren't kidding when you said this is hard?" Naruto panted. "My chakra control hasn't improved by this much since I did the tree walking exercise." "That's good, but you've barely touched the surface with the Rasengan's potential." "What do you mean?" "What you're doing now is the most basic Rasengan there is. You can alter it in so many ways. The size, the chakra density, rotation direction, double-handed, but biggest of all, adding nature transformation. So, we could make a Raiden Rasengan or a Kaiden Rasengan. In theory. In practice it's borderline impossible. I've worked for close to a decade and a half to create a Kaiden Rasengan and I haven't had the slightest success." 15 years? Naruto gaped. The Rasengan is almost an S-rank technique. The chakra cost is too high for most people. Even somebody like Kakashi can do it about 10 to 12 times. Adding nature transformation to any technique increases the chakra cost exponentially. Kakashi-sensei said he can do his Reikiri 6 times. That jutsu is an S-rank technique. Without nature transformation, even genin have enough chakra to perform that shape transformation even if it would deplete most of their reserves. So, the Rasengan with a nature transformation would be impossible for most people unless the nature transformation is applied perfectly. You'll start understanding exactly what I'm talking about when I teach you about elemental ninjutsu. You'll really teach me that? Of course. You're a chakra powerhouse and rather talented at ninjutsu. Elemental ninjutsu is the best thing I could teach you. You don't have the chakra limitations most others have. Naruto couldn't suppress a grin and nodded. Jiraiya chuckled. "Alright, enough talk about training. Let's get something to eat." "Alright, let's go, sensei." November 12th. The next 9 days had Naruto focusing on developing all the variants of the normal Rasengan. He first worked on getting the Rasengan to rotate in the opposite direction. This proved to be rather difficult since his chakra would resist against the counter spin, taking substantial effort for him to achieve it. Immediately after, he began working on increasing the size of his Rasengan. Being a jutsu based of compression, increasing the Rasengan's size required exponentially higher chakra input. To double the size, it needed 4 times as much chakra, to triple 9 times and so forth. Naruto managed to get his Rasengan to about 4 times the size, creating a jutsu he dubbed the Udama Rasengan. He had been elated at first, thinking that he had created a new technique, but deflated rather quickly when he found out both his father and Jiraiya already came up with the technique. Jiraiya chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair, telling that he should be proud that as a 13-year-old he was mastering techniques legends knew. Taking it in stride, he became motivated to create his own unique Rasengan variations. Finally came the hardest part: performing the Rasengan in both hands. It hadn't been part of the training plan and Jiraiya had told him to skip over it, but Naruto just wanted to have that perfected as well. He just wanted to have the technique his father worked on so hard to be perfected in every sense. That was why he was pushing himself as hard as he was today. The backs of his palm faced his chest. He pictured both spinning down on the side they were meeting. He felt sweat begin to pool at his temple from the amount of focus he needed. Once he had a feel for his chakra, his eyes shot open. Rasengan. He stared down to see 2 football-sized Rasengans in either hand spinning in opposite directions. He broke into a smile before he began to laugh in excitement. I did it. I did it. Pipe down, brat, honestly. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. Sorry, old habits. Jiraiya shook his head. You need to work on controlling your emotions better, kid. How would I do that? Simple, really. You had to give yourself time to suppress any reactions. Huh? I thought you meant that we shouldn't feel anything. No. Humans can't control what they feel no matter what. Trying to suppress or eliminate your emotion is impossible. It just causes you to have a lot of pent-up feelings. That Uchiha? Naruto flinched lightly. He refused to come to terms with his clan's passing. He was lonely like you, any orphaned kid would be. What did he do instead of opening up to people and admitting he was hurting? He pushed it away, trying not to feel it at all. Just look at the path it led to. Are you saying that Sasuke, being a stoic bastard, caused all this? That he ended up turning the way he is now just because he tried to get rid of all feelings except for his hatred for his brother? That's exactly what happened. All that emotion that's locked away inside us needs a release somewhere. Emotions are like energy. We ninja often need vices and hobbies to vent it because we spend so much time pushing them down. But if there is anything I learned, it's that you can't stop yourself feeling a certain way. You can control how you act on them. So, it's okay for me to, never mind. There's no need to be ashamed, Naruto. As I told you, we can't control how we feel. As long as you don't act on them, it's fine. I keep getting the feeling that I'm not doing enough. It's been a week and I feel like I should have done more than just coming up with variations of the Rasengan. To his surprise, Jiraiya burst out laughing. What the hell is so funny? Seriously, kid, you're too much. Feel like you should be doing more? Naruto's face reddened in anger. Of course I should. I have to get strong. Careful, while it's good to aim to be stronger, a lust for power will only corrupt you. Jiraiya had turned completely serious. Isn't that what happened to that Uchiha boy? Naruto flinched lightly. Yeah. Sit down, Naruto, and listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you I want you to remember and understand for the rest of your life. Nodding slowly, Naruto took a seat. See, like I said, there are some things in life that we can't control no matter what. We like to all think that we have the ability to truly change our reality. People take comfort in this illusion of control. That's why everybody always believes that they are doing the right thing. If you asked a tyrant why they're killing the very people they rule, what do you think they'll say? They're doing it because they think they're right. But doing something like that is evil. Based on what? Because it's wrong and we shouldn't do it. And we don't do the same? Naruto's eyes widened. You're saying Konoha does that? As much as I detest saying it, we do. Konoha is different, but we are still a shinobi village. The Anbu Black Ops work on suicide missions. If they're caught, we leave them to the vultures, claiming that they're worse off without them. That he's saving many for the cost of few. But that's wrong, is it? Doesn't Konoha do the very same thing? Sacrifice few shinobi to protect the masses? What? But we're built on teamwork and never letting our comrades die. Yes, that's our founding principle, but do you believe that every single shinobi follows that? Do you believe that everybody agrees with that principle without question? Naruto was about to yell of course they did, but then images of Mizuki and Sasuke flashed through his head. No, but I don't understand. Do we really sacrifice people like that? In cold blood? Not in cold blood. Rather, shinobi are those willing to put their lives on the line for something more important. But can you say that for everybody? People have motives, dreams and goals. Sarutobi-sensei mentioned that one of your Chunin instructors tricked you into stealing the forbidden scroll of seals with the intent of killing you. Do you think you could have swayed him off his hate for you? I don't know. And that's alright. You have to ask yourself, are you willing to endanger your comrades and friends on the off chance that you can convince them to not take the wrong path? Beating them to submission and giving them a chance at redemption is one thing. But in the midst of battle, trying to convince them otherwise is paramount to stupidity. That's the true reason you couldn't bring that Uchiha boy back. Naruto flinched lightly. I didn't want to hurt him. What was your mission? To stop Sasuke from going to Orochimaru. It wasn't to save him or bring him back. It was to stop him from going to Orochimaru, who now has a chance to get the Sharingan. You saw firsthand just how powerful he was even without his jutsu. Imagine having one of the most feared Kekkei Genkei on top of that power. Naruto sat stock straight. He'd wipe the floor with Konoha. Indeed, fortunately there are contingencies in place to prevent it from occurring. What do you mean contingencies? He was a flight risk. Tsunade isn't blind Gaki, and she knew he'd run to Orochimaru the first chance he got. With our forces diminished following the invasion, a group of genin would be most likely to go after him. She knew you'd be on the team and you would be the one to fight him in the end. She foresaw all that? Not alone. Several people pooled in their thoughts and we formulated some plans to prevent Orochimaru from getting his hands on the Sharingan. But understand this, Naruto. Not always will there be a safety net to allow you to fall back on should you fail to complete your mission. Some may very well lead to the fall of Konoha if you're not careful. Then why didn't you tell me any of this before? That I screwed up? Jiraiya ruffled his hair, which only infuriated him, because you can learn and grow from this. You will mess up plenty of times, but I expect you to learn from them. You considered Sasuke a friend, but you can't value a single friendship over the well-being of an entire village. A Hokage's duty is to protect the welfare of the village and all its people. You have to not only understand what your mission parameters are, but what are the short and long-term consequences. Every time a person leads a mission, they must be careful when considering this, or it could be the spark needed to ignite the next major conflict. But one simple failed mission couldn't lead to a world war, right? Naruto asked, but his eyes widened when Jiraiya shook his head. Which one? The Third Shinobi World War was started over an argument on a plate of dango. Naruto was completely lost for words. Can you say that again? The Third War was started over dango? You can call it the match to the bonfire. All the escalating tension and conflict was sparked by an argument over dango. A small conflict between Iwa and Kusa shinobi over some dango caused a brawl to break out. This escalated into an ugly battle. Konoha moved to investigate, but this sent the wrong message. Every hidden village became cautious and began throwing accusations from this simple action. Iwa began aggressive propaganda against Konoha, and they began attempts to infiltrate a megacure, which they thought was weakened severely after the Second War. Boy, were they wrong, since it only served to incite Hanzo the Salamander. His forces repelled Iwa, who then attempted to infiltrate Kusa no Kuni. There was a single mission sent from Konoha with some of our best men. Their instructions were very simple: to destroy Kanabi Bridge before Iwa could use it to set hold in Kusa. They failed, didn't they? Indeed, Iwa took control of Kusa no Kuni and began to lay siege into Hai no Kuni. Kumogakure, seeing their opportunity, advanced from our east flanks. Suna remained neutral, while Kiri attempted to take out both Kumo and Konoha. All this fighting over one damn plate of food? So many lives lost, so much violence. But how does this have to do with completing a mission? Simple, the man was to return to his village immediately. Instead, he decided to take a break, which caused said brawl to happen. This is a somewhat exaggerated example, but there's a moral to this. Sarutobi-sensei faced a similar dilemma as you did. He let Orochimaru go. Why? Because he was his student. He had known him for years, molded him, turned him into the shinobi he was. He hesitated in striking him down out of sentimentality, which was understandable, but given what Orochimaru is today and all the atrocities he has committed, he held himself responsible for years. So Sasuke could. You can never know for sure, but you need to put him out of your head. Obsessing over what could have happened or what can happen won't achieve anything. Focus on what you are capable of doing now. Train and learn to the best of your ability for the 3 years to come. Focus on what you can change and what you can control. You'll be amazed just how much you can change and grow just by doing that. It sounds tough, but I'm game. That's the spirit. It's been a good talk, but we need our rest. Get some sleep and we'll pick up from tomorrow. Hi, good night sensei. Night Gaki. His eyes were closed but his mind remained awake, lost in thought. He felt a strange lightness at that. He'd always worked to suppress his anger at himself and the world, suppress his resentment because he thought it was wrong to feel that, since he reasoned that it would just prove the villagers right and he'd end up disappointing those close to him. But what Jiraiya and Tsunade told him made him realize something important. He could lower his guard around them. He didn't have to act tough around them all the time. They understood, and they wouldn't pity or mock him for it. Maybe he could always count on them to support him no matter what. Maybe just once he could trust a person blindly instead of acting like he did. As a kid he trusted the Sandaime almost blindly. He was the only person that interacted with him or treated him like a human being. Anything he told him, anything he asked, Naruto would comply without question. But as he got older he started to feel like he wasn't being entirely honest with him. He started to feel that every time he spoke to him it was to achieve something rather than out of the goodness of his heart. He didn't know how far this feeling was true, but what he did know was he had slowly lost his trust in him over the years. After he learned he was a Jinchuriki, he had become very wary of the old man. He never showed it, but during his time as a genin he barely trusted him. But thinking back to how perceptive Jiraiya, Kakashi and Tsunade were, was it a stretch to think that the Sandaime hadn't noticed how he truly felt? But even he had made no such indication, always acting as though everything had been the same. Did he really care about him then? He wanted to believe so, but he just couldn't know for sure. He brushed his hair, realizing just how little he understood people. For the first time in years he was beginning to understand just what his age and inexperience meant. There was so much he didn't know and understand about how people thought and worked. In fact, he'd say he was a bit behind his peers since he never had anybody explain much of anything to him. But sitting and actively thinking things through was making it much easier, even if he was starting to get a headache from doing so. He was coming to understand that the Sandaime had a duty to the village, which was why he'd hidden his status and his heritage. He didn't like it, but he'd willingly accept it and forgive the old man who'd cared for him when nobody else did. Then came Iruka-sensei. While they had a watershed moment with him during the Mizuki incident, something that had changed his life, Iruka had taken him for granted for the most part. In the academy he stood by and did nothing when his classmates and even other instructors picked on him. He acted like everything was forgiven because he bought him a few bowls of ramen. He always got on his case for not trying hard enough, which used to hurt him a lot. He'd pass out in training grounds so often by trying to train by himself. No matter how much he asked for help, his response would just be, "You have to try harder." Iruka would always be a lousy teacher and mentor even if he was a good person. On the theme of lousy teachers, then came Kakashi. He'd always known the man was different. Very different. Ninjas didn't usually glare at him or show their hatred like the civilians, but they still kept as far away from his as possible. Kakashi had always been willing to interact with him and was the first person outside the Sandaime and Ichirakus who had been kind to him from the beginning. This had been a welcome and a much-needed change. He'd learned many important lessons about life in the shinobi world. He respected him a lot as a person and a ninja. But as a teacher? It wasn't so much about not teaching him, it was about the fact that he left him feeling as though he had no faith in him for so many months. When he had praised him after their first encounter against Zabuza, Naruto had been on the moon. But after that mission he hadn't given even a word of encouragement. Naruto had trained twice as hard in those months before the Chunin exams, but it looked like Kakashi either didn't notice or just didn't care. It killed him every day because he thought the world of his sensei's opinion. But he had done the bare minimum with them. It was fine with Sasuke considering he had the Sharingan and a whole clan's library and resources. It was unfair for Naruto being orphaned and without his inheritance, but at least he had the Kyuubi in case things went really south. What about Sakura? She had no way of protecting herself, and no matter what excuses Kakashi made, it didn't justify not preparing her. Especially considering she was on a team bound to attract dangerous foes, the strongest Jonin of the village, the last loyal Uchiha and the Jinchuriki. What if she got killed or captured by enemies? She wasn't even trained enough to handle a group of bandits, something any genin should be able to do easily. And he had been a ninja long enough to know the kind of things people like that did if they captured a kunoichi. But despite everything, Kakashi did care for his students. He had seen how fiercely he had fought to defend them against Zabuza. He tried his best to act as a common target to help give them something to bond over even at the risk of alienating him. And if there was one thing Naruto was good at, it was looking at intentions beneath a person's actions. Kakashi had meant well even if he didn't act or show it. Naruto still held enough respect for him that he'd continue to call him his sensei. Jiraiya was the best teacher he had, which in some ways was sad considering he hadn't put in much effort into it so far. The fact that he was his godfather ticked him off a lot. He had given his reasons, neither did he like them nor did he think they were very good reasons, but there was no use crying over spilled milk. Besides, he was slowly becoming a pretty important part of his life. It was just so easy to relax around the man. He didn't have to hold any image of being alright or strong. He could show his weakness and insecurities. The worst that would happen was he would be teased for it. There was no judgment at all. Maybe that was what it meant to have a family. Thinking of family always made him think of Tsunade and Shizune, the only two people who had been fair to him from the beginning. They put up with his antics no matter how many headaches it caused, but they still treated him the same at the end of the day. They didn't lie to him to suit their needs, nor did they hold some expectation for him to act in a certain way. Shizune always got him to behave. It was like she had some magical switch that completely made him forget how to argue whenever she said something. She was just too nice a person to upset. Of course, there was Tsunade, who was the near opposite. She had a stubborn streak that could match his own and a temper that sent even the calmest of people into terror. Maybe it was that Uzumaki blood they shared? Whatever it was, there was the fact that she was the person he respected most in the world. Not that he'd ever tell her that since he didn't need her to hold it over his head. But then people would question him about friends. There were really very few people he could use that term for. Gaara was a friend. He understood him and he didn't take him for granted. He hadn't known him for long, but he knew he could count on him to have his back. Shikamaru and Choji were friends. The former may have been rude at times, but he was always helpful and one of the few people who could tell when something was bothering him. Choji was one of the nicest people he had ever met. He had even shared his chips with him. Choji hardly ever shared his chips, which meant a lot. He had gotten a lot closer to Lee and Neji over the last couple of weeks before he left from Konoha. They sparred multiple times. It was always fun with those two. Lee was energetic and blindingly optimistic. When coupled with the sharp wit of one Hyuga Neji, it led to more than a few enjoyable moments. Neji really had turned over a new leaf. But the rest of the so-called Konoha 11? Either he didn't know them too much or he had quite a good reason to not want to interact with them. Ino had always been incredibly rude and condescending towards him. He'd credit her for at least trying to act nicer. Kiba was a straight up to him most of the time, but he was sometimes a decent person to hang around. He didn't know much about Shino, Hinata or Tenten. Shino was practically mute. He hardly spoke a word and it was just hard to get to know somebody that way. Same problem with Hinata, except she was shy. She was always fainting and turning red around him. If he didn't know any better, he'd say she was scared of him. And he hadn't interacted much with Tenten either. That just left his teammates. Sakura brought a whole bag of emotions. He had chased after her for so many years. He never understood what dates were, but since all the girls asked Sasuke out, he supposed that's what he had to do. They kept persisting, so he thought it was the right way to woo somebody. Combined with his never-give-up attitude, he kept up at it as much as Sakura did with Sasuke. But the question remained, did he ever really like Sakura? Sure, she was smart and pretty, but as a person, she really left much to be desired. She hit him constantly, berated him and put him down no matter what. Heck, he risked his life saving hers from Gaara and she hadn't even thanked him. She had just worried over Sasuke. Always Sasuke. It was like he just wasn't there. At the gate when she had begged him to bring back Sasuke, he had realized just how obsessed Sakura was with him. It stung seeing her crying that way and basically coercing him into making that promise. He understood that people could have intense feelings for each other such that it pushed them to extremes. But to be so to a degree that she didn't even care for Naruto's well-being, somebody who she'd fought and trained with side by side, somebody who'd always tried to cheer her up, somebody who saved her life so many times. She probably never gave a damn. But as always, his optimism had borne through and he chose to give her a chance. He chose to act like they were just bad choices made by an otherwise decent person. That maybe when he returned that they just might be able to become real friends. But what it boiled down to was that Naruto didn't feel the desperate need for her approval anymore. He didn't want her to be his Sakura-chan, or for her to care for him. Mainly because he'd come to realize that Sakura had been nothing but his way of trying to beat Sasuke. Naruto slammed his face into his palms. He was just as obsessed with Sasuke as Sakura was. But if he was really being honest, he did have an excuse. Sasuke was one of the few people who didn't only understand what it was like to be alone but who understood what it was like to be living with a deep-seated hatred every day. But the actions he took? Naruto didn't hate Sasuke for defecting or trying to kill him, rather he understood just how selfish his actions were. He's seen Kakashi use that jutsu enough times to know how lethal it was. Every time his sensei had pulled it out in front of him, it always resulted in death. The only reason he was still present was because he was a Jinchuriki. Such a technique would have certainly killed any of the other retrieval members. He flinched lightly as the image of him impaled shifted, showing each of the members in his place. Choji, Neji, Shikamaru, Kiba, Lee, Tamari, Kankuro. The only ones who could have survived such a blow were him and Gaara, and he wasn't very certain on the latter's chances given he hadn't taken a normal one too well, much less one powered up by the cursed seal. And then there was all that his sensei had told him about how sparing Sasuke could have been a costly mistake. Naruto had connected the dots and realized he was implying that he could become the next Orochimaru. Itachi was so damn strong, so it wouldn't be a stretch for Sasuke to get close. And what if one day he decided the village had wronged him in some way and he declared vengeance on it? With the single-minded focus he showed in his vengeance against Itachi, it made Naruto feel very uneasy. But then there was also the fact that he'd been able to stray the likes of Zabuza, Neji and Gaara from their paths. They all were similarly controlled by their darkness but had seen the error in their path. Couldn't the same happen to Sasuke who was on such a path? Didn't he still have a chance at redemption? Whatever decision he made regarding Sasuke, it would have to wait. His feelings on his friendship with him and whether he deserved redemption or not were issues that could wait until later. For now, he'd have to focus on getting strong. Strong enough to accomplish his goals and keep everybody safe. Which meant he'd have to focus even harder than he was now. No begging for cool jutsu, not expecting to be told what to do and especially not slacking off to daydream. He had training to do and just like Jiraiya sensei told him, he would have to put everything he had into it. It was time for Uzumaki Naruto to grow up. Year 15, March 8. Alright, get to work, Kakashi said. Wait, sensei, can you tell me how to do it again? Naruto yelled to his slowly retreating sensei, but all he was met with was a hard hit to the head. He winced lightly and turned around. God, you're such an idiot, Naruto. Don't you pay attention at all? I did pay attention, I just don't get it. Figures, idiot. Grr, shut up, Sasuke. Naruto growled, but in response he was hit over the head again. Don't yell at him, Naruto baka. God, why can't you act more like him? Why do you? But he trailed off, realizing Sakura had begun to run after Sasuke again. Meanwhile, Kakashi remained standing to the side staring at the scene. He sighed lightly before walking away. A sudden flash of white occurred. Year 15, March 8. Border between Hai no Kuni and Kawa no Kuni. Naruto. He sat up slowly just as his eyes opened up. That dream, it was a pretty accurate representation of his time in Team 7. Despite having left the village for over a year, he found himself going back to his time in Team 7. He had thought he had resolved all issues he had with his team for now, but it was evident that he hadn't yet. Thinking back to it, the problem was he had let all three of them off the hook far too easily and far too often. Sakura was the easiest to forgive, even though he felt she didn't earn it. There was a lot of things about Sakura that really pissed him off. One of the biggest would have to be how much she took her parents for granted. She always had some trivial complaints about them or would just call them annoying. She did this despite knowing that the three other members of Team 7 were all orphaned. How on earth could somebody complain about having parents? About having a family? He hated that she took it for granted, when there were so many orphaned children in Konoha. It just highlighted the thing he hated the most about her, just how insensitive she was. It was always exaggerated around him because she seemed to go out of her way to be rude to him. She'd act all nice around him, occasionally claiming she felt bad. It was condescending and humiliating, something she refused to see no matter how much Naruto told her it wasn't necessary. The problem with Sakura was that she just loved interfering with him. She claimed she wanted nothing to do with him, but she'd drop everything to berate him at a moment's notice. Even after he'd stopped asking her out, she still continued this habit. Would it have mattered if he protested it from the start? He didn't know, but what he did know was he wouldn't take such treatment from her again. Maybe that was the reason she continued doing it, since he never fought back, she just continued. Whatever the reason, he'd just have to start standing up for himself and stop taking people's crap. And he had to stop letting positions stop him from calling out people. He never called out Kakashi because he thought it was wrong to do so to one's sensei. He respected him a lot and he thought he was the coolest, but the simple fact was Kakashi had screwed him over, something which he himself acknowledged. He couldn't hate the guy for the life of him. He would always remember how fiercely he fought Zabuza to defend them. But the simple fact was that their relationship wasn't that of equals. Kakashi was the adult and the superior officer. He was meant to be the responsible one, he was meant to help him grow and mature. Instead, he held an unfair expectation for Naruto to do it himself. He did the same thing with Sakura, but he never expressed any disappointment when she messed up. That was the part that killed him. Because of that, he always would relegate him to go back to basics and work on the same old things, the very things he would practice for hours each night after team missions. He had always wanted him to acknowledge he was improving, but it only happened when he came through in life or death situations. He really should have held Kakashi more accountable and squeezed out every jutsu he can from him, which he reminded himself to do when he got back. Even though he got along better with Kakashi than Sakura, he held him more accountable simply because he was an adult and a jonin. Sakura was the same age as him and had just become a ninja, so it was unfair to hold her to the same standard. But that didn't excuse Sasuke. Not one bit. Sasuke had tried to kill him, for heaven's sake. The guy called him his best friend, then tried to end him. He had gone on and on about how killing him would sever their bond, giving him some magical boost in power apparently. Despite that, a part of Naruto kept wanting to forgive him. A small part of him kept wanting to understand him and his pain, and this annoyed him to no end. Sasuke had never made the slightest effort to empathize with him. Naruto had come to realize that all he had meant to Sasuke was a measuring stick, somebody who he could compare himself to, but only so far as he was weaker than him. That was not friendship. Lee was a friend. He understood what it was like to be mocked and ridiculed. He always made an effort to cheer him up and never mocked him, no matter how badly he messed up. Shikamaru was a friend. Despite his dismissive nature, he always made an effort to help him out wherever he could. He could always count on him to have his back. What about Sasuke? All he ever did was mock him and always put him down. Sure, he'd had his back in dangerous situations, but it always came at the cost of him doing something reckless or stupid when his ego got bruised. Sakura had called his rivalry with Sasuke petty, but so what? He had a right to be petty when the guy put you down every 30 seconds and acted like he was so far above everybody. Heck, that was what his whole life was built on. Let it go, they're suffering, you shouldn't blame them for it. Maybe it was okay to an extent, but people were more than happy to take advantage of it. The villagers were more than happy to use him as their scapegoat. They took comfort in the fact that he wouldn't retaliate. He should have retaliated. They didn't have the right to act scared or judge him because he did. He didn't have to be afraid of that. Having time away from the village really helped him realize that. Nobody had the right to mistreat him and expect him not to give it back. If they cried harm and foul, well, it was their own damn fault. And Tsunade was Hokage now, not the Sandaime. She would back him up no matter what. He was 100% confident that even if he murdered somebody for no reason, she would defend him till the end. Oh, and he was going to give it back to them all real bad when he got back. He was looking forward to it. It wasn't selfish at all. He endured their crap for 12 years. That was more than enough time for people to get over their loss, and it was never a valid excuse to begin with. The real selfish thing would be invalidating the sacrifice his parents made by continuing to be overly altruistic and making himself miserable and stunting his growth, just so that people wouldn't get upset with him. His parents died to keep him alive. His father was doomed to eternal torment within the Shinigami's stomach after sealing the entire power of the Kyuubi within him. It was this painful reminder that got him focused every morning. He stared into the mirror watching his face transform. Initially reflective and somewhat lost, it sharpened, a sense of raw determination and focus to reach his goal. To become the strongest ninja in the world. Jiraiya. If somebody had come to him a little over a year ago and told him that this would be his routine, Jiraiya would have laughed his heart out. But the reality was that it was inevitable, a consequence of his own irresponsibility. Every day, Naruto trained with incredible discipline and dedication. Every second, every day, every week, was planned out. When he trained, there were no distractions and his entire being would go into it. Thankfully he had enough sense to take breaks. As for Jiraiya, he was taking his role as a teacher very seriously. He actually stuck around watching Naruto's progress, intervening when he was making any significant mistakes and providing all the support he could. It was very different than the approach that he had taken with Minato, with who he'd leave training material to work with and return a few hours later to check his progress. Based on what he'd gathered, Naruto had faced a problem with all his teachers. This wasn't his fault at all, since Jiraiya knew this entire issue was because of the clusterfuck created by him, the Sandaime and Kakashi. Right before Naruto's entry into the academy, he and his sensei had planned out Naruto's entire shinobi career. He was to join the academy at 6. Sarutobi was to watch over his progress and provide nudges here and there to help him graduate as one of the top-placed rookies by the age of 10. Following this, Kakashi would take him under his wing and help him make Chunin rank by 13 when the exams happened in Konoha. After this, Jiraiya would offer him apprenticeship where he would help him gain Jonin-level skills and master the Kyuubi's chakra. Following this, they'd begin training him to be the next Hokage. He had never felt like a bigger idiot. There were far too many holes in such a plan. It was based off nothing but wishful thinking. No analysis, no method, no evaluations. They just expected everything to fall into place. Naruto paid for it. He was left at the hands of the ignorant academy instructors, who would simply ignore him. A glance at Naruto's academy records would reveal he started off rather well in the academy. He wasn't the top, but he was well above average, which spoke volumes of his ability since he had no prior training. But he faced a rather drastic slump and he had become the lowest ranked student well before the end of the first year. He had never bought the explanation that Naruto had started to find the material too complex and was incapable of following. It didn't add up with any of the other things he had done. Learning the Kage Bunshin in a single night, mastering the henge to the point that he could effectively mask himself from elite Jonin. Learning the tree walking exercise in 3 days despite having Kage-level reserves and finally mastering the Rasengan in a week. What it pointed to was that Naruto simply lacked the motivation to do well in the academy. When he asked Naruto about it, his response had left him feeling slightly sick. What the hell was the point in trying? The better I did, the more questions I asked, they'd just be twice as harsh with me. They'd kick me out of class, bruise me up in a taijutsu bout, look for any excuse to make me feel like crap. It just wasn't worth it. The fact that academy instructors behaved that way put him off. The academy, even during the more militaristic years, was somewhere where all students felt safe and welcome. Jiraiya had nothing but great memories from his time at the academy. If a place filled with ninjas, people who had knowledge of sealing and chakra did such a things, he didn't want to know what happened to Naruto through his childhood. Even his best estimates were rather grim. Despite having a rather healthy relationship, Jiraiya knew he would permanently be on thin ice around him. Trying to pry something of that nature would be the push needed to break it. The only person with hope of possibly getting it out of him was Tsunade. But he knew her well enough to know that she would leave it alone. But this made Jiraiya somewhat uneasy. His loyalty to the village had always been unquestioned, but with light of what Naruto had turned into, had he been fighting for a lie all these years? Was the wool of fire simply propaganda used to gain the loyalty of their shinobi? After decades of being assured in what it was, he was losing sleep over it. He was afraid of asking Naruto, because he had an inkling that his instincts would force him to defend the village for their actions despite knowing how wrong it was. He wouldn't risk alienating Naruto at such a stage. Despite everything he had put him through, he still needed him, and he needed him the most right now. He was still very young and there was a lot he had to still learn about the world. It was Jiraiya's responsibility to look after Naruto these 3 years and to help him grow into the man he was destined to be. And for the first time in his life, Jiraiya stepped up when he was needed the most. Naruto fell to the ground exhausted, almost, this time, he managed out between breaths. Jiraiya smiled lightly as he tried to catch his breath. Normally, I'd laugh it off, but, you gave me a good run for my money, kid. He perked up instantly. Really? Yup, you're coordinating your clones effectively, you've got the strength and speed to cause some damage and all your techniques are perfectly adapted for your combat style. I've literally got fuck all for techniques. Kage Bunshin, Shuriken Kage Bunshin, Henge, Kawarimi, Rasengan, Oryoke, Shunshin and Taijutsu. A lot of good that'll do me, he grumbled. Don't be like that. Tell you what, how about you spend the next couple of months picking up nature transformation? I know a couple of futon techniques which should be useful. Can't I just learn the techniques? You can, but it would be counterproductive. If you learn nature transformation, learning the jutsu will be a simple matter of practicing and you can even invent your own techniques since you have so much chakra. If you say so, how do I get started? The first exercise is cutting a leaf cleanly in half using your chakra. The second is splitting a waterfall. Thankfully both Minato and Kushina were futon-natured, so I know of these exercises. Both of them, huh? So your affinities get passed down? If I remember correctly, it's sometimes affected by the environment you grow up in, but you have a tendency to develop the same affinities as your parents. You should ask Tsunade about this stuff, she's the expert. Well, better get started then. Call if you need any help. Wait, I wanted to ask you something. Ask away. He took a breath. This is kind of personal, but, did you ever think about forgiving Orochimaru? I see, some part of you is trying to rationalize what the Uchiha boy did, right? Yeah, I shouldn't want to. He tried to kill me, I'm afraid if I can forgive that, I'll keep being everybody's punching bag. Well, it's a valid concern. But you shouldn't worry too much about it since it's quite normal. So you felt that way too? Believe me kid, I did. Unlike you, I believed those rationalizations for a few years. I thought it was a huge misunderstanding and everything could be settled. Even after I realized that he had turned into a twisted psychopath, I still wished there was a way for everything to go back the way it was. It can't be helped. Those bonds that we shared were real no matter how much we say otherwise. It's just human nature to try and defend those we once cared about, but I have complete faith that you'll do the right thing when you run into him the next time. So Orochimaru really was your best friend? He wasn't always like this. He had a dark and sadistic side, sure, but he was somewhat caring and considerate in his own way. You might just see a freak and a monster, but he was once just as human as you or I, a brilliant one too. He really could have been a great Hokage. Sarutobi sensei blamed himself for years because of that. I get that he was his sensei, but it couldn't have been his fault, right? It was different with us. He had begun to train Orochimaru to be his successor the minute he was put on his team. He trained and raised him to be a Hokage, but he ended up turning into a sick and deranged psychopath who took pleasure in experimenting on people for his own selfish desires. After that happened, he did everything in his power to stop another Orochimaru from arising. Is that why he always told me not to fight back if I was abused? He was afraid that I'd become the next Orochimaru. Jiraiya sighed. You have to understand that you're the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and the child of two of Konoha's most powerful shinobi. He decided to play cautious with you and mold you into a loyal shinobi of the village. I see. Look, you may have learned things that you don't like and that paint a bad image of sensei, but for all his mistakes he really did care for you kid. He tried to the best of his abilities to care for you and balance his duties as Hokage. Whatever, he muttered before walking off. Jiraiya shook his head. It was a shame because what he said was true. It didn't excuse his sensei for what he did, but he really hoped that Naruto would find it in him to forgive him. But it looked unlikely. Maybe it was for the best? Instead of blindly forgiving everybody, he should resent them. Kushina always did say that holding in her emotions made it harder for her to control the Kyuubi. He chose to trust in Naruto's instincts and really hoped that everything would end up working out. Konohagakure, Residential District. Sakura. She shot up instantly. That memory, it felt so far away, but she remembered it very vividly. She really did miss the old days. What surprised her the most was that she really missed Naruto. She used to find his energy obnoxious and really annoying, But now she began to realize that it just made the day seem more alive. And it wasn't just her. Konoha in general just felt so much duller. When news spread that Naruto had been trained by Jiraiya of the Sannin for the Chunin exam finals, there was expectedly a lot of skepticism. Nobody would believe that Uzumaki Naruto of all people was taken under the wing of one of Konoha's greatest shinobi. But then there was the fact that he had beaten Neji. To many people he had only pulled that off since he had trained under a Sannin. It made sense after all. He had beaten the Hyuga prodigy after struggling to get past Kiba. And then there was the fact he had beaten Sabaku no Gaara, not Sasuke. It had been confirmed by Temari herself, and Sakura knew the Tsunaku no Ichi wouldn't lie about such a thing. This was before he had left to train for 3 years. This had given all the rookies a strange level of motivation to work harder. Everybody had been trained incredibly hard for the Chunin exams they just took a few months prior in Suna. But Sakura had a very different motivation. All she wanted was to save her Sasuke-kun. Everything could have been traced back to the day he got the curse seal from Orochimaru. Everything had changed after that. She remembered in her early days at the academy, how everybody was instantly drawn towards Uchiha Sasuke. He was cool, talented, good-looking and came from one of the most powerful clans in the world. She found herself drawn to him from the moment she'd come to know of his existence. But things began to change after that. With the Uchiha massacre, Sasuke had begun to grow a bit distant. Everybody had come to one single conclusion. This was the best time to win Sasuke's heart. There had been fierce competition to gain his attention. Fierce to the point that they had begun to break their friendships apart, much like she and Ino had. But nobody had even the slightest amount of success. Sasuke remained as stoic and indifferent as ever. But that all changed when she was put on the same team as him. She believed it was a sign that perhaps she truly could win his heart. She had thought she was getting closer to Sasuke. She thought that she was finally beginning to chip away at that coat of apathy he wore. These thoughts especially surfaced during difficult missions. But then right after everything would return just to normal, Sasuke would just continue to ignore her and act as distant as ever, sometimes even more so. It left her in a constant state of ambiguity, since she could never really tell how he felt about her, but that was until that night. It was the worst and best night of her life. Sasuke abandoned the village, but at the same time, he thanked her. He thanked her. That had to mean something, right? He wouldn't thank her unless he felt something for her. Maybe she was overthinking this, but she had to believe that Sasuke meant it. Because it was what pushed her every day, it was what made her study hard under Tsunade. Because she would give everything she had to save her love. Tsunade watched silently as Ino and Sakura tried their best not to snipe at each other inside the hospital's library. It had been an interesting year and a half. So much had changed in the mere year and a half that Naruto had been gone from the village. First, the fact that she'd taken on Sakura as a full-time apprentice and Ino as an occasional student. It had turned out very different than what she had expected. When Sakura first approached her, she'd been rather impressed with how forward she was. It took a lot of guts to walk up to the Hokage and request to be their student. After reviewing her files and finding a plethora of evidence that she possessed prodigious levels of chakra control, she accepted her as her apprentice. Sakura had made great progress under her, but it wasn't to the level she had expected. She was a Sannin and she wanted Sakura to be a whole lot stronger than her peers, not as strong as them. Being the apprentice of the Hokage meant she could be used for both intel as well as a bargaining chip by other villages. Sakura had to become a lot stronger, but there were two major issues. The first was barely at genin level when she first began training under her. Very basic taijutsu, poor conditioning, no additional ninjutsu or genjutsu in her repertoire and complete lack of combat awareness. It was understandable in the first couple of months as a genin, given they were young and inexperienced, but when she was a genin for almost a year and showing some form of motivation towards improving, the problems all pointed to one individual. Her Jonin sensei. For the life of her, Tsunade couldn't understand what compelled her sensei to make Hitaki Kakashi a Jonin instructor. His efforts with Team 7 had been disturbing. She hadn't been pleased with him based on what Naruto had told her, but when she found out he had stalled Sakura's progress as well, she had been furious. She remembered that particular conversation very clearly. Let me get this straight. So you prioritize making a cohesive team by completely ignoring their skills and growth? Kakashi, are you 12 years old? What is wrong with you? She snapped. Kakashi sighed. I have no excuses, Hokage-sama. I truly believed it was the correct path to go forward. In my eyes, it was fair if I didn't train any of them. Fairness is based on who needed it the most. The Uchiha boy had a whole clan's library and training since his youth. What did the other two have? Sakura, a civilian girl, and Naruto, an isolated orphan. They needed twice the attention as the average genin. Kakashi wisely remained silent. Look, I'm taking over Sakura's training now, so there isn't much that can be done. When Naruto gets back, you will be leading him and Sakura on missions again. There's still a lot they both have to learn, and despite everything I still trust you to watch over them. You're the adult, so you better act like one and take up responsibility. I understand. Oh no, you're not the hook that easy. You're going to be doing D-rank missions whenever you're off duty for the next 3 months without pay. Kakashi sighed. Very well, Hokage-sama. The punishment had been humiliating and painful for the Jonin, but he had completed it without complaint. Though it still didn't change the issue she had. She had to train Sakura to be a kunoichi. Having Ino along certainly helped, but it was proving an incredibly difficult task. Sakura, while incredibly talented, was at the same time incredibly naive, lacked the right kind of motivation, and had a lot of misconceptions about the shinobi world. Having Ino, a clan heir who'd begun to get her act together, had really helped Sakura start growing, but there was a major issue. Sakura was by far the weakest genin in the village. She held the belief that she were one of the strongest among their peers. It had really worried her a lot. Overconfidence was the worst enemy of a ninja. Physically, Sakura was far below par. She wasn't confident of her chances in beating a gang of bandits, a common occurrence during missions. It gave her nightmares thinking of what would happen to a young girl like her if she was ever captured. Such a fate was worse than death. It had taken time and a lot of work, but it was beginning to show. She was a solid Chunin-level shinobi, which she had been immensely proud of. But she was prouder of her progress with Iryo ninjutsu. She was truly gifted in terms of chakra control and was making great strides as her apprentice. Despite this, she was also somewhat frustrated. Sakura was dedicated and focused, sure, but she had a terrible tendency to stagnate. She never trained on her own time, preferring to hang out with friends or study the same old material again and again. The problem lied in Sakura's motivation. She was training hard because she wanted to save the Uchiha. But the only way it fit into her fantasy was that she'd save him through the power of love. She never said this out loud, only admitting that she wanted to be strong enough to walk in front of Naruto and Sasuke. It was infuriating because she wasn't willing to give her all into doing it. It was almost as though she believed it would simply happen by saying it would. The problem was that Sakura was disheartened far too easily. It wasn't easy for her, but Tsunade had to do her best to not be too negative. While Sakura did have a lot of problems as of right now, she had immense potential. She was going to give her all to make sure Sakura achieved it because she had finally found somebody who could take her throne as the strongest kunoichi in the world. Sakura, come here. Tsunade called out. You needed me, Shisho? Could you organize these files in the archives? Of course. I'll get to it right now. Sakura picked up the box of files and briskly walked into the room. As she placed the files, a realization hit her. She was in the most secure room within Konoha. There was information here that even Jonin may not know. And she was all alone in here with no security. She glanced around the corner, determining nobody was watching her. There'd be no harm if she had a quick look in one of the files, right? She went towards the U section and slowly scanned through it. There, she gingerly pulled out the file. Uzumaki Naruto. Her eyebrow furrowed upon seeing the red stamps all over and the number of pages in the file. Just another mystery in the enigma that was her teammate. She opened up the page and began to read, but stopped almost instantly. Her eyes remained fixed on one set of words, her heart beating wildly and her mind frozen in complete shock. She was so shocked she didn't notice somebody move into the room. Sakura. What do you think you're doing? Shisho? Naruto, he's Naruto Kyuubi, it doesn't, what? Her outburst was broken when her arm was gripped tightly and she was pulled out of the room rather forcefully. The next few minutes were a blur, at the end of which she found herself sitting down in a seat in an empty room with Tsunade staring her down with a fearsome glare. Sakura, what on earth do you think you were doing? She asked, trying to keep her calm. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Tsunade took a deep breath. Sakura, what you did was incredibly foolish. Some of the information in there could start the next war if it leaked out. I wouldn't tell anybody, but it can be extracted from you by interrogation, extortion, drugging, or even on accident. All it takes is one slip to start a leak. How can you expect me to trust you now? Sakura hung her head, choosing to remain silent. But she did eventually speak. Shisho, what is a Jinchuriki? Tsunade sighed. I figured this would come up eventually. Jinchuriki literally means the power of human sacrifice. This term is used to describe a very specific set of people, those who have Biju sealed within them. Biju like the Kyuubi, which means that Naruto is. She nodded grimly. Yes, Naruto is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. As powerful as the Yondaime was, even he couldn't kill the Kyuubi. It's a massive malevolent chakra and it simply can't be destroyed. Having no other way, he was forced to seal it within a living being to contain. That container happens to be Naruto. So that's why there are some who truly believe that Naruto is the Kyuubi reborn. It's based on nothing more than fear and irrationality. Most have been dealt with, so the only reason still remaining is that most people simply didn't trust a child to contain such a mighty beast. This proved too much for her as she yelled out, but why Naruto? What on earth did he do to deserve this? He had nobody. I used to call him a pest, she mumbled as she began to sob. Tsunade pulled Sakura into a hug. The life of a Jinchuriki is difficult. Fear and misunderstanding causes people to push them away. The fact that you understand he's just as human as us is a good sign. If you really intend to make it up to him, then treat him as an equal, not somebody who's meant to always be beneath you. And it'll be okay just like that? I can't say anything for certain, but Naruto is a good judge of character and intentions. If you really are genuine about making it up to him, he won't turn you away. Thank you, Shisho, she whispered. I still don't understand one thing though. What is it? Why on earth would people subject others to something like that? Why would anybody willingly seal away a Biju into a person? Because Jinchuriki are typically made to be weapons of war. What? Tsunade shook her head. It's a product of all the war and conflict. Each nation looks for a way to offset the balance of power in their favor. They do this by creating new techniques or training better shinobi or employing different tactics. I think you get the idea. The Biju are massive masses of chakra, the tool we use for all our shinobi arts. If a ninja were to harness all this power, in theory they would become an unstoppable juggernaut and could easily wipe even the strongest army. But most Jinchuriki end up plagued with mental instability, insanity, and even possessed by their prisoners. The push to turn into weapons often weakens their minds and they tend to turn violent, almost feral. The Godem case cage, Gaara, is of the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. Her eyes nearly shot out of her head. It was shocking but at the same time made so much sense. So, Naruto could have turned out like that? A complete psychopath, who just kills for pleasure. It's hard to say Sakura. The fact that Naruto isn't the slightest bit deranged after facing abuse for 12 years should say something about it. But it could have taken just one bad choice. If everything happened to him had got to him and pushed him to choose a path filled with hatred, things would have been very different today. I see, though, he'd be glad to know that there's somebody his age that accepts him for who he is, not for what's inside him. Trust me, Sakura, everything will be alright. I don't know. I don't believe I'm going to say this, but, believe it? Sakura stared at her for a minute before they both burst out into laughs. She felt a load fall off her back with this. Maybe everything really would be alright, and she'd do everything she could to stand by Naruto's side and make it happen. Hidden base Oni no Kuni. Sasuke. His eyes shot open and instantly he felt a wave of irritation pass over him. No matter how much he tried, he always kept going back to those damn memories. Memories of his former team. Every time he thought he had finally forgot about them, they would resurface. They really were a bunch of pests, never leaving him alone in peace. No doubt they would be training hard to save him from the darkness. They made him sick. Naruto and Sakura would always remain beneath him no matter what. They were both weak and nothing but pests in his eye. They'd just keep chasing after him, never leaving him alone. They would never understand what he had suffered, and the thought that they said they could just infuriated him. He was an avenger and now, he would crush anybody who got in his way. And this was why he hated thinking about his former team. It always got his blood boiling and he hated it because to him it signaled some sort of attachment. He couldn't have that. It was a distraction and he couldn't afford it. He glanced around his room. It was dark. Most of Orochimaru's bases were barely lit, since it made it difficult for intruders and prisoners to navigate. They were typically lined with few wooden torches, giving it a rather archaic feeling. His room was bare of any sort of decoration or personalization, leaving it rather bare. The walls were made off slightly worn clay, bits of gravel and dirt strewn about the floor. There was a single bed, just big enough to fit one person and with plain white sheets. The only evidence that Sasuke had stayed in the room was the presence of weapons and training scrolls neatly tucked away in one corner. It was a far cry from the rather luxurious life he lived in Konoha. Even after his clan's demise, he lived in a rather high-end two-bedroom apartment he had all to himself. At times he found himself annoyed with the standard of living in Orochimaru's bases. It was beneath somebody like him. Worst of all though was that he always had to keep his guard up. Nobody could be trusted in any of his bases. Orochimaru wanted to possess his body and there was little stopping him from doing it on a whim. The only reason he hadn't done so yet was because he wanted to perfect his future vessel. If he decided he wanted to take over Sasuke's body today, there was little he could do since he wasn't even close to challenging the Sannin. Despite what he had told Naruto, he fully intended to carry out his vengeance himself. Then there was Kabuto. While he claimed to loyally serve Orochimaru, it was evident that he had his own motives. He was especially dangerous, since Orochimaru would occasionally listen to his suggestions and he was far more cautious than the Sannin when it came to Sasuke. Kabuto was far more likely to be suspicious and would probably see through his plans. Kabuto couldn't do much in stopping him, but with Orochimaru to back him up, it would put him in a tight spot. Plus, the bastard was slippery and could hold his own in a battle. Outside those two he was basically a walking target. Most of the prisoners and shinobi were just waiting to take a shot at him. The only reason Orochimaru hadn't intervened was because he found the entire thing rather amusing. It wasn't. The maniac stood by watching him as he suffocated from his poison-laced meal. The whole thing had made him far more cautious and showed him just how naive he was. But this didn't even come close to the absolute worst thing about Otto. When he was in Konoha, he had absolutely loathed his fangirls. They were annoying, constantly pestering him, and he just hated the way they tried to smother him with their affection. But they didn't even come close to the crazy Otto girls. Forward was a bit of an understatement when it came to them. It was clear to him quite early on that they had been tasked with getting pregnant, either with promises of freedom or just because they were fanatical followers of Orochimaru and did anything he asked for. Regardless, this meant that there was nobody he could trust, but wasn't this the path he wished for? One where he was alone, without anybody to hold him back. It didn't matter. This was a sacrifice he was willing to make in the pursuit for his vengeance. Nothing else mattered anymore. Not the crappy standard of living, not the lack of allies, not the growing hatred he felt. Nothing. Orochimaru. Contrary to what many people believed, Orochimaru was actually a very happy person. He truly enjoyed what he did and didn't have many regrets. Of course, one would have to account for the fact that he was a sadistic, homicidal psychopath. Human beings were truly amusing creatures. So much time and energy was wasted on meaningless pursuits and emotions. Ultimately, everything they did was invalidated by the fact that they died. His former sensei always preached on the importance of the next generation, but Orochimaru could never quite grasp it. What was the point? In a world filled with so many mysteries, why would one willingly subject their limited time to the care of another? In the end they were all going to die anyways, and they couldn't possibly hope to match up to his genius. When Anko was his student, he saw immense promise in her, but he came to realize that she may never surpass him. He was the only one who could discover all the secrets of this world. He was the only one who could. But even with his genius, time was against him. There was only so much that could be achieved even in a century of life. There had to be a way around it. This stirred him towards his path of realizing immortality. It was painstaking and had become his sole focus for the last decade, but it was all geared towards achieving something much greater. As an immortal, he would uncover every last stone and mystery of the world. The bridge to that dream was now the Sharingan. He had watched Itachi through the first few years of his shinobi career. He had become enthralled with how skillfully he used it. The abilities it granted him took a talented boy and turned him into a near-perfect shinobi at such a tender age. Now imagine what he could do with it. To be able to learn jutsu instantaneously? To have such an intimate understanding of chakra? To capture the most minute details with ease? It made him giddy with glee every time he thought of possessing those eyes. He really had to thank Itachi. He had made Sasuke far too easy to manipulate. Sasuke was so blinded by his vengeance for Itachi that he would literally leap into a snake's pit. The fools in Konoha were too constrained by their moral obligations and concern, causing them to discourage Sasuke's path. So to get him to come to him, all he had to do was encourage it. Provide him power, promise him that he would get stronger. It had been child's play getting him there. Now not only would he have the Sharingan, but he would possess a body with incredible physical ability and chakra, one which he had 3 years to work onto his design. Just a little over 18 months and he would finally have the Sharingan. Oh yes, it was going to be sweet. Sasuke sat silently watching the drops fall down the IV bag. He was alone inside the dark, dank room receiving his latest treatment of a chakra-enhancing substance. He'd gone through many such procedures which had bolstered his physical abilities far beyond anything he'd imagined. He sensed a movement behind him and sheathed his Chikudo by his side. Those crazy girls really didn't know when to. Realizing who was in the room, he was about to charge lightning chakra in his free hand, but he was stopped when he felt a powerful pressure bearing down on him. He recognized this technique, Kanashibari no Jutsu. Why so aggressive, Sasuke-kun? I didn't startle you, did I? Orochimaru asked with fake innocence as he stepped out from the shadows. What do you want, Orochimaru? Sasuke asked, keeping himself impassive. Orochimaru chuckled, is that any way to talk to your dear teacher? Cut the crap, you only talk to me when you want something. So, spit it out. How perceptive of you. Don't move around now or the procedure will fail, he replied lightly as he began to circle Sasuke, who remained tensed up but did not move. It appears both your teammates are being trained by both of my own. What do you make of this? It's inconsequential. Is that so? Are you underestimating Tsunade and Jiraiya? Sasuke narrowed his eyes but didn't reply. Foolish boy. They are two of the most powerful shinobi in the world. It would take you years to ever match either of them. I heard Jiraiya was powerful, but Tsunade? What will she do with her Iryo ninjutsu? Orochimaru's laugh caused him to scowl. You really think that low of her? She is incredibly intelligent, has almost unmatched vitality, can kill a Jonin with a single finger and heal off anything but a fatal blow. You don't stand a chance. He barely suppressed his rage. Whatever doesn't mean their students will amount to anything. If that pink-haired girl becomes even a quarter as strong as Tsunade, she will be a very real threat. As for Naruto-kun, he is already stronger than you. Stronger than me? The fact that I'm here says otherwise, he growled. Oh, is that why you spared him? He asked mockingly. I was under the impression that your ego was bruised since he was stronger than you when you fought in the Valley of the End. Shut up? His laugh rung in his ears as he continued to speak condescendingly. I could sense the Kyuubi's chakra all the way from my base. If he was using that much, then even Kimimaro at his peak would have fallen. And you just surpassed him. Do you know what that means, Sasuke-kun? His Sharingan spun to life as he grit his teeth tightly. He held back, he. With that he was gone. Sasuke stared at the ground before grabbing the needle and pulling it out. He shunshined into a practice room filled with numerous wooden mannequins. His sword in hand he charged them. For an hour he swung and hacked every piece until all that was left was splinters. Scratch marks were present all over the floor and walls. He stared at the reflection he saw in the face of his blade. His face twisted with rage, his eyes glowing ominously and his teeth almost bared. His face captured just how much rage his body was experiencing. It was so strong he could feel his curse seal pulse and heat radiate off his skin. Orochimaru was well aware how much he had worked to suppress the events of that day. Yet the callous bastard so casually kicked it open, only to let him wallow in those insecurities. Naruto could have killed him 3 times over that day. It was the only reason that he was standing, not because of his strength. It was unacceptable. Such a thing occurring meant that Naruto wasn't beneath him. That couldn't happen. The only way things would be set right was for Sasuke to return the favor. To beat him down and spare his life. To let him live in an unsightly manner as he had. Itachi had always been his goal. The singular entity that pushed him day in and day out to work to the bone, to gain all the power he could to take him down, but there were two more people on that list now. Before Itachi, Orochimaru would fall, and after Itachi, Naruto would fall. They would taste his vengeance and regret crossing him. He swore on it because that was his ninja way.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.